Fiona's point of view.
The smell of smoke clung to everything, the crumbling ruins of the outer district, the torn sleeves of my jacket, even the loose strands of hair that stuck to my damp forehead. I pressed a bloodied hand against the cracked stone wall, steadying myself as I peeked around the corner. 3 Orion guards, full tactical gear, semi-autonomous drones humming at their shoulders, their boots crunched on the broken glass as they moved through the wreckage, methodical and merciless. They weren't looking to arrest anyone. They were here to clean up the survivors. I tightened my grip on the makeshift med pack slung across my back. Inside were the supplies I had risked everything to gather: antibiotics, sterile gauze, a few doses of painkillers, the kind of luxuries the wounded rebels hiding underground couldn't dream of. The kind of luxuries people killed for. I sucked in a shallow breath and glanced upward. The second moon, the smaller one, the one scientists said wasn't even a real moon at all, hung low and sickly orange in the sky. Its pale light slid over the ruins like a hand searching for something lost. Keep moving, I told myself, one step at a time. The crumbling city used to be called New Providence, once a thriving outpost for engineers and agricultural scientists before Orion annexed it. Now it was just a tomb. One more ghost town. I darted across the alleyway, keeping low, heart hammering against my ribs. Every movement sent sharp pain through my side, a souvenir from a soldier's baton during the last raid. Still, I moved. People were counting on me. I was halfway down the next block when a sharp voice rang out behind me. "Hold it! Identify yourself!" My stomach dropped. "Don't run. Running makes you a target." I turned slowly, squaring my shoulders. I was not a fighter. I was a doctor, but people underestimated what survival taught you. The lead soldier, tall, cold-eyed, helmet tucked under his arm, approached with confident, measured steps. His rifle hung loosely in his hands, but the threat was obvious. "What's your designation?" he barked. I lifted my chin. "I'm a medical responder. Civilian sector." It was half true. I had been a licensed medic once, before the council stripped away civilian rights in the name of order. The soldier's gaze swept over me, assessing. Noticing the dirt, the torn clothes, the swelling around my bruised ribs. His mouth twisted slightly. "You don't look very official," he said. "You're not very good at first impressions either," I shot back before I could stop myself. The second soldier chuckled. The leader didn't. For a moment, the tension thickened like a storm about to break. Then the leader stepped forward, invading my space, so close I could see the small scar just under his left eye. His voice dropped low. "You're out past curfew. You're carrying unauthorized medical supplies. That makes you a collaborator." I swallowed hard. My fingers itched toward the concealed blade tucked into my belt. I could cut and run maybe, but I'd never outrun the drones. The soldier watched me, waiting, enjoying it. And then, with a sharp mechanical whine, the drone at his shoulder jerked sideways, its scanners flashing red. "Incoming transmission." The soldier stiffened and tapped the comms link in his ear. I caught snippets. "Rebels in the East Sector. Urgent recall. Command priority." The leader's scowl deepened. For a heartbeat, I thought maybe, just maybe, I was about to get lucky. Instead, he grabbed my wrist, yanking me toward him with brutal efficiency. "You're coming with us," he said. "Command wants every suspect processed." My heart thundered in my ears. If they took me inside Orion territory, I'd disappear. No trial, no questions, just gone. "No," I rasped, yanking backwards. The soldier's grip tightened hard enough to bruise, but before he could drag me toward the transport, a blast ripped through the air. The ground shook. Dust and debris rained down from the half-collapsed buildings. Someone rebels had set off explosives at the East Sector gates. The soldiers cursed, momentarily distracted. In that heartbeat of chaos, I did what desperate people do best. I ran. I sprinted down the alleyways, lungs burning, vision blurred by smoke and fear. I heard them shouting behind me, the buzz of drones giving chase. Faster, my mind screamed. Move faster. I veered sharply, cutting through the ruins, vaulting over a pile of rubble. My sides seared with pain, but I didn't stop. I couldn't. Not when there were wounded waiting for me. Not when every step was a chance at life. Finally, I reached the old storm drain and scrambled inside, heart hammering against my ribs like a war drum. The narrow tunnel swallowed me whole, damp and pitch dark, muffling the sounds of pursuit. I collapsed against the cold metal wall, gasping. For now, I was safe. But tonight had been a warning. Orion was tightening its grip, supplies were drying up, the underground network was crumbling. And next time, there might not be a lucky explosion to save me. I pressed a trembling hand to my chest, feeling the thud of my pulse. I have to find a way out, I whispered to the darkness. Before they find me first. Somewhere above, the stars flickered faintly through the ruined world. A reminder. Hope was dangerous. But it was all I had left. Kellen's point of view.
The city burned, and all I could think about was how damn tired I was. East Sector breach. Rebels confirmed. Repeat. Rebels confirmed. The voice crackled over my comms unit, sharp and panicked. I adjusted the rifle slung over my shoulder and signaled to my squad to fan out across the wrecked boulevard. Dust and ash swirled around us, painting the sky in shades of blood and rust. Another day. Another act of rebellion. And another failure stacked against my record. I tapped my earpiece. Secure the perimeter. No one in, no one out. We take prisoners if we can. If not, neutralize. Lieutenant Arlen finished grimly. Exactly. I moved quickly, my boots crunching on shattered glass, my mind already calculating. Rebels had gotten bolder lately, hitting supply routes, hacking drone feeds, stirring up the desperate ones still hiding in the ruins. This wasn't random chaos anymore. It was coordinated. And if Command found out I'd let another one slip through my fingers, I wouldn't just be reassigned. I'd be buried. I clenched my jaw, pushing the thought aside. Focus. Control. Victory. We cleared the square in minutes, my men rounding up a few scared civilians, no sign of the real fighters yet. I was moving toward the west corridor when Arlen jogged up, out of breath, his helmet tucked under one arm. Commander, he said, there was an incident during the patrol sweep. Civilian female, slipped through the net after the explosion. I froze. Civilian female. Not just a fighter then, someone important enough to risk extraction mid-op. My mind flashed back to the moment before the breach, the woman in the alleyway, defiant, quick, not a panicked runner like the others. She'd known how to move. How to survive. Description? I asked. Late 20s, medium build, black clothing, medpack. Medpack. I swore under my breath. A medic, a rebel asset, and she was still out there. Arlen shifted uneasily beside me. Orders? Initiate citywide sweep, I said. Double patrols in all sectors. No one rests until we find her. He hesitated. Sir, with respect, if she's just a medic, if she's a medic, I cut in sharply, then she's more valuable than 10 soldiers. A medic meant supplies. Connections. Information. And if I was right, if she was the one aiding the rebel strongholds beyond the walls, then capturing her could crush the resistance before it gained real traction. Before it became another full-scale war. Arlen nodded stiffly and moved off. I turned away, scanning the smoke-choked horizon, my pulse hammering in my ears. I needed to find her. Not just for the mission. For me. Because in the split second our eyes had locked across the alleyway when she'd faced me without flinching, something had shifted. Something cold and rusted inside me had stirred, like a blade being pulled free after too long buried. I didn't like it. I didn't trust it. But I couldn't deny it either. I spent hours moving through the ruins, methodical and merciless, kicking down doors, interrogating survivors, tracking footprints through ash and blood. No sign. Damn it! I was about to call off the search for the night when my comms crackled again, a static-laced whisper. "Commander Drake, priority alert, intelligence intercept." I stiffened. "Go ahead." "Unconfirmed reports of rebel movement near the old storm drains." Storm drains? Of course. I pulled up the map on my wrist display, heart pounding harder now. The labyrinth of tunnels beneath New Providence had been abandoned after the last flood decades ago. Perfect for smuggling supplies. Perfect for hiding. Perfect for losing me. Not tonight. I moved, fast and silent, through the wreckage. The entrance to the main drain was half collapsed, a jagged maw of concrete and twisted metal. I slipped inside, the stale, wet air closing around me like a fist. It was almost pitch black. Good. I was better in the dark anyway. I moved carefully, boots splashing through shallow water, rifle raised. Every few steps I paused, listening. Breathing. Somewhere ahead, a soft scrape echoed leather against stone. Not a rat. Not an animal. Her. I followed the sound, heart hammering, muscles coiled tight. The tunnel curved, leading into a wider chamber where the moonlight slashed down through a broken grate above. And there, crouched against the wall, clutching the medpack like it was her last shield, was the woman. The rebel. The medic. Her dark skin glowed faintly in the silver light. Her hair was a mess of tangled curls, her clothes torn and bloodied, but she still held herself upright, defiant, proud, beautiful. Dangerous. Our eyes locked again. I saw the moment she recognized me, the way her shoulders tensed, the way her fingers inched toward something hidden at her belt. I raised my rifle, sighting down the barrel. "Don't," I said quietly. Her eyes narrowed. "You'll shoot me anyway." I almost smiled. Almost. "If I wanted you dead," I said, "you'd already be bleeding." Her mouth twisted into something bitter. "Forgive me if I don't find that comforting." "Drop the blade." Slowly, reluctantly, she drew a small knife from her belt and let it clatter to the ground, but she didn't step away from it. Smart. She knew better than to trust a soldier's mercy. I lowered the rifle slightly but kept it ready. "You're coming with me," I said. She laughed low, rough, and tired. "Like hell I am." And then, before I could react, she ran. Straight past me, shoulder slamming into my side with surprising force. I caught her by instinct, spinning, slamming her back against the wall. Her fists flew, wild and desperate, catching me across the jaw, the ribs. I grunted, absorbing the hits, grabbing her wrists and pinning them to the stone. We were both breathing hard now, faces inches apart, her heart hammering against my chest. For a long, electric moment, neither of us moved. Her eyes blazed up at me, furious and unbroken. And I knew with a certainty that shook me to my core that this wasn't the end of the fight. It was only the beginning. "What's your name?" I asked, my voice rough. She bared her teeth in a grim smile. "Fiona," she spat. "Dr. Fiona Solis. Rebel. Traitor. Whatever label helps you sleep at night." Fiona. The name settled into my bones like a brand. I tightened my grip just slightly, feeling the strength in her arms, the fury in her blood. I should have called for backup, should have cuffed her, dragged her back to command in chains. But instead, I just stood there, breathing her in like she was the first real thing I'd touched in years. Across the crumbling world, the stars pulsed brighter, cold, and unreachable. And for the first time in a long, long time, I wondered if maybe some battles were meant to be lost. Her name still burned in my mind like a brand. Fiona Solis. I tightened the cuffs around her wrists, not hard enough to cut off circulation, but tight enough to send a message. No more running. She glared at me the whole time, unflinching even as I jerked her forward. "You're making a mistake," she said, her voice low and seething. I didn't answer. What could I say? That I already knew? That every instinct screamed that bringing her in would change everything, not just for her, but for me? Orders were orders. Doubts didn't matter. Not in Orion. I kept one hand clamped firmly around her upper arm as we moved back through the ruins, heading for the evac point. My squad was already sweeping the area, cleaning up the stragglers. Arlen reported 2 more rebel captures with minor injuries. No civilians were dead, this time. The usual procedure would be immediate transport to Blackhold Orion's maximum security detention center. But the usual procedure wasn't going to happen tonight. Not with her. "Keep moving," I said roughly when she stumbled over the uneven ground. She hissed out a breath. "Where are you taking me?" "Somewhere safe." She gave a short, humorless laugh. "Safe for who?" I ignored her. In the distance, the second moon hovered low over the horizon, throwing long, broken shadows across the dead city. The hum of transport engines reached my ears, heavy, armored carriers moving into position for prisoner collection. But I didn't radio them. Instead, I guided her off the main road, down a side street half swallowed by rubble and vines. My boots crunched on the broken concrete. She struggled against my grip once, twice, testing my strength. I didn't let go. I couldn't. We reached the safe house 15 minutes later. It was a decayed building, maybe an old school once long abandoned and marked as structurally unsound. Perfect cover. No patrols bothered searching here. I punched in the override code at the hidden entrance and shoved the rusted door open. The inside was dark, cold, concrete walls, basic supplies, no comforts. It wasn't meant to be a home. It was a place to wait, to break people down. I pushed her inside and closed the door behind us. She whirled on me the second it shut, her cuffed hands raised like she was ready to fight again. I had to admit I admired the fire. Most prisoners were broken long before this point. "Fiona?" She was only getting started. I slung my rifle over my shoulder and took a step closer. She didn't back down. "You're not taking me to Blackhold," she said. Not a question. A statement. "No." Her eyes narrowed suspiciously. "Why not?" I exhaled, running a hand over the back of my neck. The words tasted wrong in my mouth. "Because they'd kill you before you ever made it to interrogation." Silence. Her breathing was heavy, the rise and fall of her chest sharp in the dim light. I could see the quick flicker of emotions across her face, confusion, suspicion, reluctant understanding. "You need me alive," she said finally. It wasn't a question. I nodded once. "You know things," I said. "You have access, contacts. You're worth more breathing." Her mouth twisted. "Information. That's all I am to you." I said nothing. Because what could I say? Lie? Tell her she was anything more? I barely understood it myself, the hollow ache that had opened up when I'd seen her run. The instinct that had made me haul her out of that tunnel instead of leaving her for the death squads. I didn't do empathy. I didn't show mercy. Not anymore. And yet, here I was, guarding a rebel instead of executing one. "You'll stay here until extraction," I said, voice clipped. "Then we negotiate." Her laugh was dry and cracked like old paper. "Negotiate? You think I'm going to sell out my people?" "I think," I said quietly, You want to live." She looked away sharply, jaw clenched. We both knew the truth. Living came at a price. The only question was whether she was willing to pay it. I crossed the room and retrieved a small emergency kit, water, rations, a roll of bandages. I tossed it onto the cracked table between us. "Patch yourself up," I said. "You're no good to anyone half dead." She stared at the kit like it was a bomb, like she expected it to explode in her face. Then, cautiously, she stepped forward and picked up the water bottle. Her fingers shook slightly as she twisted off the cap, but she masked it well, drinking slowly. I watched her, the silent stretching taut between us. She was a puzzle I couldn't stop trying to solve. What drove a woman like her to risk everything, to run into gunfire to save others? Was it anger, hope, desperation, or something worse, something stronger? Belief. People who believed were dangerous. People who believed couldn't be bought. And yet, as I watched the way she wiped blood from her temple with the edge of her torn sleeve, stubborn and proud even in chains, I felt the smallest, most dangerous thought creep into my mind. Maybe she's not the enemy. Maybe Orion was wrong. Maybe I was wrong. The idea was cancer, spreading fast through everything I thought I knew. And if I wasn't careful, it would destroy me from the inside out. Hours later, after she'd fallen into a restless, exhausted sleep curled up against the wall, I sat on the opposite side of the room, rifle balanced across my knees, staring at the cracked ceiling. Outside, the moons moved across the sky. The rebellion was growing stronger every day. The command was getting more ruthless. And somewhere deep inside me, a war had started, one I didn't know how to win. I looked at Fiona, the faint rise and fall of her chest, steady in the gloom. She wasn't just a prisoner anymore. She wasn't just a rebel. She was the match, and I was the gasoline. And when she finally struck, the whole damn world would burn.
Fiona's point of view. I woke with my cheek pressed against cracked concrete and the sour taste of blood in my mouth. For a second, I didn't move. Didn't breathe. The world around me was still and humming the low, thrumming tension of a place caught between survival and collapse. When the memory hit me, it slammed in like a blow. The fight, the chase. The man with the dark eyes and a colder heart. Kellan Drake. I pushed myself up onto one elbow, wincing as pain flared along my ribs. My wrists ached where the cuffs bit into the skin, raw from struggling against them. Across the room, he sat with his back against the wall, rifle resting casually across his knees, watching me. Always watching. Silent, sharp-eyed, a predator at rest, but ready to strike. "You're still here," I muttered, wiping the dried blood from my mouth. "You're still breathing," he said flatly. I glared at him. "Give it time." He didn't smile. He didn't even blink. Just sat there, as steady as a damn statue, weighing every word I said, every twitch of my muscles, every flicker of my eyes. Waiting for me to make a mistake? I shifted slowly, assessing. The door was behind him, locked, of course. No windows, just thin cracks where moonlight barely scraped through the broken ceiling. No weapons nearby. No hope of backup. I was alone. And he knew it. I leaned my head back against the wall, exhaling slowly through my nose. Are you planning to kill me here or just stare at me until I drop dead?" I asked. His jaw ticked. "Barely." I caught it. "If I wanted you dead," he said, voice low and lethal, "you wouldn't have woken up." My stomach twisted, not from fear, from fury. "You think keeping me alive makes you noble?" I snapped. "You think it erases everything you've done?" He lifted one eyebrow, a slow, dismissive gesture that made my blood boil. "I don't care about being noble," he said. I care about getting answers. Answers? I laughed, bitter and sharp. You'll have to do better than locking me in a cage, soldier boy. His eyes darkened. You're not in a cage, he said. Yet? The threat hung there between us, thick and heavy. For a long time, neither of us moved. Just two predators circling the same wounded ground, waiting for the other to strike first. Finally, he pushed himself to his feet in one fluid motion. I tensed, ready to defend myself, cuffed or not. But he didn't cross the room. Didn't touch me. Instead, he tossed a ration pack onto the floor a few feet away, the impact sending dust into the stale air. Eat, he said. You'll need your strength. I stared at the packet like it was poison. Forgive me if I don't trust food from the executioner's table, I said sweetly. His mouth twitched. Almost a smile. Almost. Gone in a blink. Suit yourself, he said, turning away. Hours passed in an agonizing crawl. He didn't speak. Didn't sleep. Didn't lower his guard for a second. It drove me crazy. I shifted tactics. You don't strike me as the mindless, obedient type, I said after a while, letting my voice drop into something almost casual. Why are you still playing for the wrong side? He didn't turn around. You're wrong, he said. I'm very obedient. But not mindless. Silence. I pressed harder. Orion's losing. You know that, don't you? I said. The colonies are rising. Even Earth's council is questioning the occupation. You're fighting for a dying empire. Still nothing. I leaned forward, my voice dropping to a knife-sharp whisper. You're on the wrong side of history, Commander. This time, he moved. Fast. In 2 strides, he was in front of me, grabbing the front of my torn jacket and hauling me up so fast my feet barely touched the ground. I sucked in a breath, heart hammering, but I didn't look away. Wouldn't give him the satisfaction. He glared down at me, close enough that I could see the faint scar cutting through his right eyebrow, a line of white against tan skin. Save your speeches, he growled. You think you know about the war? You think you know me? I know enough, I spat. You know nothing. The words cracked out of him like gunfire. Raw, unfiltered. And for a split second, there it was, the glimpse beneath the armor. The fracture lines. Not just obedience, not just loyalty. Regret. Maybe even guilt. But then the mask slammed back down. He shoved me roughly away. I stumbled, barely catching myself on the wall. He turned his back on me again, like I was something he didn't want to see anymore. Good. I didn't want to see him either. I sat down heavily, breathing hard, my wrists throbbing where the metal cut deeper from the scuffle. Across the room, Kellan Drake leaned his head against the concrete wall and closed his eyes. A man at war with more than just the rebels. A man at war with himself. I didn't sleep that night. Neither did he. By dawn, the air was brittle with unsaid words. I shifted, feeling the stiffness in my joints, and decided on one more gamble. You know, I said lightly, if you were really loyal to Orion, you'd have turned me in already. He didn't respond. Instead, I continued, you're hiding me, breaking protocol, risking court-martial, execution. He opened one eye lazily, like a cat disturbed from a nap. Your point? My point, I said, is that you're lying. To them. To yourself. Another beat of silence. Then so quiet I almost missed it, he said. Maybe I am. A chill went through me, sharper than the cold concrete against my skin. Because if Kellan Drake, Orion's finest weapon, was questioning everything, then maybe we had a chance to win this war after all. The plan formed in my mind long before the sun climbed over the ruins. I watched him through half-lidded eyes, still pretending to sleep as Kellan Drake moved around the safe house. He wasn't careless, far from it, but even he had weak points. And weakness was something I could exploit. The cuffs around my wrists were the first problem. When he brought me a ration pack again that morning, tossing it at my feet without a word, he underestimated just how well I could use it. The foil was thin, sharp. When he turned his back for a few minutes to inspect the door's external locks, I bent the packet's corner against the floor, grinding it until it shredded into a jagged edge. Good enough to pick at the small internal mechanism of the cuffs. Good enough to buy me a chance. My heart hammered in my chest, wild and furious. If he caught me, no. I wouldn't get caught. I moved slowly, carefully, angling my body so he couldn't see what I was doing. Working the foil into the cuffs took longer than I wanted, every second stretching like a blade over my skin. But finally, click! The right cuff popped open. I swallowed a gasp, keeping my face impassive even as adrenaline lit me up like a live wire. Half free. I waited. Waited until he moved toward the supply shelf again, his rifle still slung but not immediately aimed at me. Then I struck. I exploded off the ground, shoving to my feet and ripping the second cuff free with a brutal yank. Kellen whirled, instincts razor sharp, but I was already moving, darting low and fast toward the door. Stop, he barked. Not a chance. I slammed into the exit with my shoulder, ignoring the flare of pain. It groaned under the impact but didn't give. Locked, reinforced. Damn it! I spun just in time to see him charging. No gun, he didn't fire. He didn't want me dead. That was his mistake. I threw the ration pack's torn foil at his face, a stupid move, but it bought me half a second. I dove sideways, grabbing a broken chair leg from the debris pile and swinging it toward him. He blocked it with one arm, grunting as it cracked across his forearm, but he didn't stop. He grabbed the makeshift weapon and wrenched it out of my hand, tossing it aside like it was nothing. We grappled hard, messy, vicious. Nothing like the clean battles Orion soldiers trained for. I fought dirty. Knees, elbows, teeth. But he was bigger. Stronger. Trained to kill. He slammed me back against the wall, pinning my wrists above my head in one brutal, iron-fisted grip. I kicked at him, struggling, my breath coming in short, furious bursts. Let me go, I shouted. No, he said, low and deadly. Our faces were inches apart, breathing hard, the heat of the fight wrapping around us like a noose. For a second, I saw something flash through his eyes. Not pity, not anger, something closer to regret. And then it was gone. He yanked me away from the wall and half dragged me back to the center of the room, slamming me down into the chair and securing the cuffs again tighter this time, biting into bone. I thrashed once, twice, but it was no use. Trapped. Again. He stepped back, running a hand through his hair, furious. You could have gotten yourself killed, he snapped. Better than rotting in a cell while you pick my mind apart, I spat back. He paced the room, breathing hard, a man barely leashed. Oh, you don't get it, he said roughly. I'm not your enemy right now. I laughed, loud and bitter. You are the enemy, Commander. Always have been, always will be. He stopped pacing, staring at me like he was trying to see something past the anger. Something deeper. You think you know everything about me, he said quietly. About this war. About Orion. I know enough, I snapped. I know your people bombed New Jakarta into dust. I know they turned Pacifica into a refugee wasteland. I know you don't care how many civilians die as long as your flag flies higher. His jaw tightened. You think the rebellion doesn't have blood on its hands too? He said, voice low and dangerous. You think your leaders haven't sacrificed civilians to make Orion look worse? I opened my mouth to fire back, but something in his voice stopped me. Something bitter. Something hollow. I narrowed my eyes. You're lying. I'm not, he said. And you know it. I shook my head, defiant even as my stomach twisted. You're trying to mess with my head. Trying to break me. No, he said simply. I'm trying to wake you up. The words fell into the room like lead, heavy and unwelcome. I looked away first, staring hard at the cracked floor to avoid the unbearable weight of his gaze. Because part of me, the smallest, most traitorous part, wanted to believe him. Wanted to believe that not everything was black and white. But that was how people died. That was how revolutions died. I don't care what lies you tell yourself, I said, my voice shaking only a little. You're Orion, you're the enemy, and I will never help you. He stared at me for a long time. Then he nodded, once. Good, he said. I'd rather fight someone with fire in their blood than someone already broken. He moved back to his watch post, dropping into his usual silent vigil, rifle across his knees once more. And I sat there, cuffed and burning, hatred coiled tight in my chest like a living thing. Night fell again. Neither of us slept. Neither of us spoke. But the silence between us wasn't empty anymore. It was a battlefield of its own. And somehow, in that darkness, a new terrible truth began to take root in my heart, a truth I didn't want to admit. This war wasn't going to be won by bullets alone. It was going to be won or lost inside people like Kellan Drake. And inside me. Kellen's point of view.
I sat in the half-shadowed room, watching the night stretch endlessly beyond the cracked windows. Fiona hadn't spoken since her failed escape. She sat rigid in the corner, arms crossed, cuffed once more, but her eyes burned with silent rebellion. I should have turned her in days ago. Should have sent a transmission to Central Command, requested immediate retrieval, handed her over for interrogation. But something had stopped me. Something I couldn't explain even to myself. I leaned forward, elbows on my knees, rubbing my hands together in restless agitation. How had I gotten here? A flicker of movement at the window snapped my attention sharp. Not Fiona. Outside. I rose silently, sliding the rifle into my hands, and moved toward the sliver of broken glass. I kept low, heart beating steady, trained senses stretching out into the darkness. The night was too still. Too quiet. They're coming. I didn't know how, but I knew it in my gut. Maybe it was the way the streetlights 2 blocks down suddenly cut off one by one. Maybe it was instinct, honed from years in enemy territory. Either way, it didn't matter. We were out of time. I turned back toward her. Fiona had noticed the shift in my body language, smart, fast. Her muscles were already tense, like she expected another fight. We need to move, I said shortly. She narrowed her eyes. Why? Planning to drag me to another hole in the ground? No, I said. Planning to keep both of us alive. Her laugh was bitter. Spare me the hero speech. I didn't bother arguing. There wasn't time. I crossed the room in 3 strides and unlocked her cuffs, ignoring the way she jerked her arms back as if my touch burned her. You try to run again, I said lowly. You won't make it. Her chin lifted, defiant. Maybe I'll die free. I met her gaze, unflinching. Maybe you'll just die. We moved fast through the abandoned streets, keeping to the shadows. I kept one hand lightly on her elbow, not to control her, but to guide her. She shook it off once, twice. But after the third near miss with one of Orion's hovering drones, its searchlight slicing through the darkness mere feet ahead, I tightened my grip on her elbow and steered us down a narrow side alley. The drone's mechanical whine grew fainter as we ducked beneath a toppled hover car and pressed ourselves flat against the cold brick wall. I waited, every muscle coiled, until the drone's beam swung past and its engines receded. Then I whispered, "Keep moving." Fiona shot me a look, half insulted, half impressed, but she didn't argue. Instead, she followed as I led her through a tangle of back streets. Our footsteps were muffled by the debris, shattered glass, rusted metal, the bones of a city in decay. We'd been here before, the labyrinth of old maintenance corridors beneath New Providence. Engineers once used these tunnels to serve as power conduits. Now they were the only place you could slip past Orion's patrols undetected. I'd memorized every turn when we first cleared this sector. I guided her to a rusted manhole cover set in the cracked pavement. With a soft grunt, I pried it open and dropped it behind us, leaving no light, no sign. The dank smell of oil and mildew washed over me. I dropped first, then helped her down. Inside, the corridor sloped gently, lined with pipes that dripped condensation. My rifle lamp cut a narrow cone of light, illuminating old hazard warnings, faded red symbols warning of high voltage. We followed the tunnel for nearly a kilometer, or so I estimated, until the air grew cooler and the distant rumble of traffic faded. Then came the warning, a crackle in my comms earpiece. I froze. "Commander Drake, respond." It was Arlen's voice, urgent. I crouched beside Fiona. "What is it?" I rasped. Static. Then, "Command override, alert, safehouse breach. All units to secure quadrants, enemy evac in progress." My heart pounded. They'd known. Someone must have detected our transmissions, or tracked my squad's movements. The safehouse was already compromised, and now the entire neighborhood was being sealed off. Fiona's eyes flicked to mine. For the first time, I saw fear bleeding through her defiance. "We have to move," I said. She drew in a harsh breath. "You're sending me back." "I'm sending both of us back," I corrected. We sprinted down the tunnel, branches of corridors splitting off in endless permutations. I punched up my wrist display. No map access. The network was jammed. I was alone. I picked a shaft marked Sector 12 in peeling stencils and hauled us up a grated ladder. The grate protested, metal screeching against concrete, but I pried it loose and shoved it aside. We emerged into a ruined courtyard. Half-dismantled power pylons jutted from the ground, sparking blue-white arcs. Orion troops swarmed the perimeter, helmed figures in black armor, rifles trained into the darkness. Drones patrolled overhead in tight formation. Beyond them lay the main street, the route to our extraction point. If we tried to fight through, we'd be cut down in seconds. I crouched behind a fallen pylon. We needed distraction. Fiona's lips pressed into a thin line. "I have explosives, smuggled in case we got trapped. Enough to blow a corridor." I nodded. It was reckless, but it was our only option. We ducked back into the shadows. She set the charges on an adjacent pylon's power node, wires snaking across the cracked earth. Her hands worked with practiced precision. Another reminder she wasn't just a medic, but a warrior of her cause. I gave her a nod and retreated. She tapped the detonator. The pylon shuddered, then erupted in flames and sparks, sending a shockwave that rang in our ears. The explosion lit the courtyard in strobing light. Troops dove for cover. Drones veered off course. "Now!" I yelled, grabbing her hand. We broke cover and dashed across the courtyard toward a collapsed service tunnel on the far side. Arc flashes from the ruined pylons lit our path, and I heard shouts and blaster fire behind us. We dove into the rubble, squeezing into the narrow tunnel just as Orion forces regained their composure. Their searchlights swept the open space. A dozen helmets flickered in and out of view, but they couldn't see us in the dark. We ran for what felt like miles, lungs burning, ribs protesting every step. I kept one arm looped around Fiona's waist, guiding her, helping her over obstacles. I could feel her heartbeat against my side, once wild, now racing with terror and adrenaline. Finally, the tunnel sloped upward again. I pushed aside the grill at the exit, and we climbed out into the outskirts of the city. The night sky opened above us, stars bright against the choking smog. We were outside the cordon. For the moment, we were safe. We collapsed against the shell of an overturned transport crate. Fiona leaned forward, gasping, sweat beading on her forehead. I dropped beside her, scanning the horizon for any sign of pursuit. She bore her teeth in a grim half-smile. "You could have just let me die back there," she panted. I looked at her, chest heaving. And miss the chance to capture you again? I managed a humorless chuckle. She glared. I am not a trophy. And I am not your jailer anymore, I shot back. The words tasted strange, and truer than I expected. Her eyes flicked to mine, searching. Then what are you? I swallowed, the confession catching in my throat. I don't know anymore. She stared at me through the gloom, her defiance unbroken, but something softer flickering beneath. A silent question. Behind us, the distant thunder of Orion patrols echoed across the ruined skyline. Ahead of us lay miles of blasted highways and wilderness before reaching the rebel outposts. I touched the side of my face, still stinging from her fist earlier. I should hate her for that. I should hate her for everything. But all I felt was an unsteady pull, an alliance born of necessity, yet edged with something neither of us dared name. I pushed to my feet and offered her a hand. Come on, I said, the night isn't over. She hesitated, then took it. Her grip was firm. As we slipped into the darkness, fleeing together toward the only future we could imagine, I realized one immutable truth. In a war defined by black and white, we had become the gray. And gray, I thought, was far more dangerous than any exploding pylon.
Fiona's point of view. The world burned gold and red as the sun sank behind the ruined skyline. We found the tower by accident, a crumbling husk of stone and steel. Its upper floors collapsed, its windows jagged teeth against the sky. Once, it must have been a military outpost. Now, it was just another corpse on a dead world. Kellen ducked inside first, weapon drawn, scanning every corner like a machine programmed to survive. I hesitated at the threshold, heart hammering. Trapped again. But with him. No choice. We needed shelter, and not the kind you could build with hope and stubbornness alone. I followed him in. Inside, the air smelled of rust and old fire. 8 tall series, the remains of a staircase twisted upward like a broken spine. Kellen found a relatively intact corner on the second floor, half sheltered by what was left of the roof, and dropped his pack with a grunt. You should clean that, he said, nodding at my arm. I looked down. At some point during the escape, a shard of metal had torn a gash across my forearm. The blood had dried thick and dark, crusting over the fabric of my jacket. It's fine, I muttered, brushing past him. He caught my wrist not hard but firm enough to make my breath hitch. You get infected out here, you die, he said flatly. No hospital, no second chances. I yanked free, scowling. I'll manage. His mouth tightened, but he didn't argue. Instead, he crouched by his pack, pulling out a battered medkit, tossed it onto the floor between us. Suit yourself, he said. The unspoken words hung between us. You're not my problem. Not anymore. I patched myself up in silence, flinching as the antiseptic burned. Kellen sat a few feet away, methodically checking his weapons, the movement smooth and mechanical. A man built for war. Programmed for survival. And yet, he hadn't killed me. He hadn't even left me. The thought unsettled me more than I wanted to admit. By nightfall, the ruins outside were swallowed in mist. We sat across from each other, the fire between us a guttering ember of truce. Temporary. Fragile. I broke the silence first. Why didn't you turn me in? I asked, voice low. Kellen didn't look up from his rifle. Wouldn't have mattered. Bullshit. He glanced at me then, sharp and cold. But not cruel. They would have executed you, he said, publicly, to send a message. I swallowed hard. I knew that. Every rebel knew that. And you care why? His hand stilled on the weapon. For a long moment, the only sound was the whisper of the wind through broken glass. I don't, he said finally. But something in his voice cracked. I leaned forward, studying him. The firelight carved harsh shadows across his face, all sharp angles and tired fury. You're lying, I said quietly. You're not like them. He laughed a bitter, hollow sound. You don't know a damn thing about me. I know you hesitated. Silence. Heavy, suffocating. You think you're better than them, I said, pushing harder. But you're still wearing their colors, still carrying out their orders. He looked up then, and there was nothing cold about his gaze now. It burned. You think your rebellion's any cleaner? He snapped. You torch cities, you put civilians in the crossfire, you call it freedom. I flinched. Because he wasn't wrong. Not completely. Better chaos than slavery, I shot back. Is it? His voice was soft, dangerous. Or is it just another kind of warlord waiting to take over when the empire falls? For a moment, I hated him. Because he was tearing at the cracks I tried so hard to seal shut. I stood abruptly, pacing the ruined floor. My boots kicked up dust and ash. We fight because we have no choice, I said through gritted teeth. We fight because they left us nothing else. He watched me, unreadable. You think I chose this? He said. You think I wanted to be a weapon? You had a choice, I snapped. He shook his head slowly. No, I was born into it, bred for it, raised with a rifle in my hands before I knew how to read. A bitter smile twisted his mouth. Just like you were raised to hate me. The fire crackled between us, small and feeble. I sank back down, knees drawn to my chest. Neither of us spoke for a long time. Outside, the stars struggled through the haze, faint pinpricks of silver against a bruised sky. I stared at them, feeling very small. Very tired. Have you ever wondered, I said finally, if maybe we're all just pawns, fighting battles that don't even belong to us? Kellen was silent. And then softer than I'd ever heard him, he said, every day. Something shifted between us then. Not trust, not forgiveness, but understanding. A terrible, fragile thread connecting two broken people on opposite sides of a dying world. We didn't speak again that night. Just sat there, enemies still, but not as sure of it as we had been before. The morning broke harsh and cold. The tower's broken windows framed a bleeding sunrise, light spilling over the ruins like a wound too raw to heal. Kellen was already awake when I stirred, crouched near the edge, scanning the horizon through a pair of battered field glasses. Silent. Focused. A soldier to the bone. I hated how natural he looked in that role, how the sunlight caught the sharp line of his jaw, how his posture screamed both exhaustion and discipline. I hated it even more that a small, stupid part of me didn't feel afraid anymore. Just wary. Wary. And curious. We move in 10, he said without looking at me. Move where? I rasped, voice still raw from sleep and smoke. He handed me the glasses. East, he said. Through the old city. Supplies, shelter, maybe answers. I lifted the glasses to my eyes. The landscape ahead was a broken skeleton of a once proud metropolis, towers bent like dying trees, streets swallowed by nature and war. Somewhere deep within, I could just make out shapes moving. Patrols. Scouts. And something else, dark shapes fluttering like crows in the corners of the ruins. This is suicide, I muttered. Kellen shrugged, slinging his rifle over his back. Welcome to the rebellion. I shot him a sharp look. He smirked the smallest, most irritating curve of his mouth, and for a moment, he didn't look like a soldier. He looked like a man who'd forgotten how to live. We moved out at dawn. No words. No trust. Only the brittle, unspoken pact. Survive first, hate later. The city swallowed us whole within an hour, a maze of collapsed streets, abandoned vehicles, and creeping vines that cracked the concrete open like bones. Every step was a risk. Every shadow whispered betrayal. Kellen led the way, his movements precise, almost instinctual. I followed a few paces behind, knife in hand, every nerve strung tight enough to snap. Twice, we ducked into shattered storefronts to avoid patrols, black-armored soldiers sweeping the ruins with the cold efficiency of machines. Kellen pressed a hand to my back once, shoving me into cover as a drone buzzed overhead. I almost stabbed him for touching me. Almost. By midday, we found a temporary shelter, the husk of an old apothecary half swallowed by ivy. We crouched inside, breathing hard, watching the patrols pass. Kellen spoke first, voice low. "They're sweeping for survivors, not rebels." I frowned. "How do you know?" He hesitated. "Because they're too clean," he said finally. "If it were rebels, there'd be fire. Blood. They're looking for something." I swallowed. "Something worse than us." We shared a ration, stale protein bars and bitter water, sitting against opposite walls like prisoners sharing a cell. Kellen chewed in silence, eyes never resting, never trusting. I watched him. Really watched him. Beneath the armor and anger, there was something fractured about him. A man who didn't quite know where he belonged anymore. Maybe the same thing was happening to me. Maybe it already had. "We need a distraction," I said, licking crumbs from my fingers. He looked up. "We?" I met his gaze without flinching. "You want to die here?" I said. "Fine, be my guest. But I'm getting through that patrol line, with or without you." He studied me for a long moment. Then, with a reluctant tilt of his head, he said, "What's your plan, rebel?" I almost smiled. The plan was simple. Stupid. Desperate. I would set a fire 2 blocks west, a blaze big enough to pull the patrols off their route. Kellen would use the distraction to slip past the perimeter. If we made it through the cordon, there was an old subway tunnel that could get us under the city and out to the far side. If. Big if. The fire caught faster than I thought it would. Within minutes, the skeletal remains of an apartment building blazed orange against the dying afternoon light, sending up a pillar of smoke thick enough to choke the sky. The patrols broke formation, shouting orders, scrambling to respond. Chaos. The best weapon we had. We ran. Sprinting low through alleys, leaping over rubble, weaving through the labyrinth of crumbling stone and twisted metal. Kellen moved like a shadow, barely breathing, barely making a sound. I was less graceful, my boots clattering against loose debris, but adrenaline sharpened my instincts. We were almost to the edge of the perimeter when a voice barked behind us. "Freeze!" I didn't hesitate. I spun, knife flashing, and threw. The blade sank into the soldier's shoulder, not lethal, but enough to drop him. Kellen was already moving, slamming into the second guard with brutal efficiency, a sweep of his leg, a crack of bone. We didn't wait to see if they got back up. We ran. The subway entrance loomed ahead, a yawning mouth choked with vines and rusted gates. We dove inside just as the first shots rang out behind us. The darkness swallowed us whole. We collapsed against the cold stone of the tunnel, gasping, bruised, filthy. Alive. Barely. For a long time, neither of us spoke. The only sounds were our ragged breathing and the distant rumble of the fire we had left behind. Finally, Kellen broke the silence. "You throw a knife like a drunk street rat," he said. I laughed, a short, sharp bark that startled even me. "And you punch like a sledgehammer," I shot back. He smirked, and for once, it wasn't bitter. Just tired. Human. We moved deeper into the tunnels, the air growing colder and heavier with every step. The darkness felt endless. But for the first time since the world fell apart, I didn't feel completely alone. I didn't trust him. I didn't like him. But somewhere, buried under layers of hate and survival, a dangerous thought was beginning to take root. Maybe we were stronger together. Even if it killed us. Especially if it killed us. The subway swallowed the world. The last rays of daylight died behind us, leaving only the sour tang of mildew and the groan of old stone shifting deep underground. Kellen led the way, his rifle lowered but ready, his steps silent on the cracked tiles. I followed close, one hand on the hilt of my second knife, the last weapon I trusted more than him. The deeper we went, the colder it grew, until our breath steamed in the darkness. Somewhere above us, the Empire's soldiers hunted ghosts. Down here, we became them. We moved for what felt like hours, creeping through tunnels choked with debris, sidestepping rusted rails and collapsed platforms. Every so often, Kellen would pause, head tilted, listening. I didn't ask what he was listening for. I didn't want to know. At one point, we found a barricade and old checkpoint, long abandoned. Empire flags hung in tatters from the ceiling. Bullet holes pockmarked the walls. There were bodies too old, mummified by time. Rebels, maybe. Civilians, soldiers. Death didn't take sides. I skirted the corpses with a tight jaw, but Kellen didn't even flinch. This was his world. Maybe it was mine too now. We scavenged what we could, a few grenades, a cracked tablet with a half-charged battery, then kept moving. The tablet showed a rough map of the subway system. Kellen studied it under the flickering light, frowning. There's a maintenance shaft 2 miles east, he said. Could get us closer to the outer districts. And after that? He gave a grim smile. After that, we improvise. Great. I loved improvising. Almost as much as I loved being shot at. The tunnel narrowed into a maintenance corridor, barely wide enough for one person at a time. We slipped through a single file, the air thick with the stench of mold and oil. It was there somewhere between one breath and the next that I felt it. A hum. Low. Subtle. Thrumming against my bones like the world itself was holding its breath. I grabbed Kellen's arm instinctively. He stiffened, then froze, sensing it too. What the hell is that? I whispered. He shook his head. We pressed on, slower now, every step careful. The humming grew louder. Alive. Wrong. The corridor opened into a wide underground chamber, some kind of forgotten depot, bigger than a stadium. And in the center of it, my stomach twisted. A machine. Massive, twisted. Half buried in rubble and scaffolding, cables snaking out like veins, disappearing into the darkness. It pulsed with that same low hum, a heartbeat made of metal and malice. Kellen swore under his breath. I took a step forward before I even realized it. It wasn't just old tech. It wasn't something built for transport or power. This was something else. Something the Empire didn't want anyone to find. What is it? I breathed. Kellen's face was grim. A gate. I stared at him, uncomprehending. A what? He nodded at the machine. Interstellar travel, he said. Before the collapse, humanity had prototypes. Gates that could fold space, instant jumps between distant worlds. My blood ran cold. But those were destroyed. Lost. He gave a humorless laugh. Apparently, not all of them. I stepped closer, my heart hammering. The machine wasn't fully operational. Oh, pieces were missing, ripped out or scavenged. But enough of it remained to be dangerous. Enough to explain why the Empire wanted the city scrubbed clean. They didn't want rebels finding this. They didn't want anyone finding it. Because a working gate could change everything. New worlds. New resources. A way off this dying planet. Power. Ultimate, terrifying power. Kellen moved beside me, voice low. If they rebuild this, they won't just rule this world. They'll own every world. I swallowed hard. And if the rebellion gets it first? He looked at me, really looked, and for once, there was no hatred in his gaze. Only fear. Then we start a war that makes this one look like a playground fight. We stood there for a long moment, both understanding the terrible choice in front of us. Destroy it. Or control it. Either way, blood would spill. And maybe there was no right answer anymore. Only survival. The humming grew louder, the machine stirring like a beast waking from a long, bitter sleep. Kellen turned to me, jaw set. We can't stay here? No, I said, forcing myself to look away. But we can't leave it either. He nodded, reluctantly. Enemies still. Allies, maybe. Just for now. Because sometimes survival means trusting the enemy you hate. Before the greater enemy arrives. We backed away into the shadows, the gate pulsing behind us like a second sun, promising salvation. Or extinction. The tunnels swallowed us again. The sound of the gate faded into a dull, rotten heartbeat behind us, but it clung to my skin like cold oil. I could feel it even now, that thing pulsing, breathing, alive in a way no machine should be. We moved in silence for a long time. Not because we trusted each other, because neither of us had the words for what we had just seen. Finally, Kellen stopped near a broken support pillar, checking the map on the cracked tablet. We need to talk, he said. I leaned against the wall, arms crossed. You mean you talk? I listen? His mouth twitched, the ghost of a scowl. Fine, you first, rebel. The words still stung. Still tasted like poison. But for once, I didn't bite back. Because he was right about one thing. The Empire couldn't be allowed to have the gate. Neither could the rebellion. Not as it was now, fractured, desperate, filled with factions willing to burn the world if it meant winning. We were standing at the edge of something worse than any war we'd ever fought. And neither of us could survive it alone. I straightened, meeting his gaze squarely. We destroy it. Simple. Brutal. Final. Kellen didn't flinch. He just stared at me with those frost-colored eyes, weighing the words. And if I say no? I shrugged. Then we kill each other here and now, and the Empire walks away with a prize they don't deserve. A long silence stretched between us. Tight. Heavy. Somewhere above, something rumbled, distant thunder, or maybe a drone passing overhead. Time was running out. Kellen exhaled slowly. You think it'll be that easy? No, I said. I think it'll be a miracle if we live long enough to try. Another beat of silence. Then to my shock, he extended his hand. Rough. Calloused. Scarred by 100 battles. A soldier's hand. An enemy's hand. I hesitated. Everything in me screamed not to trust him. But survival demanded more than pride. It demanded the kind of betrayal you lived with afterward if you lived at all. I reached out and clasped his wrist. Tight. Unflinching. The unspoken deal passed between us like an electric current. Destroy the gate. Whatever it cost. The plan was simple. We needed explosives. We needed a way back into the chamber. And we needed to move fast before the Empire realized the gate had been discovered. Kellen thought there might be an old armory buried deeper in the tunnels, a leftover relic from the last uprising. I didn't ask how he knew. Some things were better left unspoken between enemies. We moved quickly now, deeper into the underbelly of the city. Every corner reeked of rust and old blood. Every shadow whispered threats. Twice we ducked into side passages as patrols swept the main tunnels, black armored soldiers armed with pulse rifles and the cold indifference of executioners. I watched Kellen move and studied the efficiency of him. Calculated. Ruthless. A killer not by choice, but by necessity. Maybe that was why I hadn't put a blade in his back yet. Maybe that was why, despite everything, I didn't truly fear him. After an hour, we found the armory. It was buried behind a collapsed maintenance shaft, a narrow tunnel barely big enough to crawl through. I squeezed through first, cursing under my breath as jagged stone ripped at my jacket. Kellen followed, grunting as his rifle snagged on the rusted bars. We emerged into a small steel-lined room coated in dust and ash. Most of the supplies were long gone, looted or rotted. But a few treasures remained. 3 crates of old C4 charges, a spool of detonator wire, and miraculously, a working ignition device. Kellen whistled low. Jackpot. We worked in grim silence, checking the charges, priming the devices. It felt wrong to touch them, wrong to prepare for destruction on a scale I couldn't yet imagine. But there was no other choice. Not anymore. As we packed the explosives into makeshift satchels, Kellen broke the silence. Why are you really doing this? I glanced up sharply. Saving your ass seems like charity work. He snorted, the closest thing to a laugh I'd ever heard from him. No, he said. Not just today. The rebellion, the war, the blood. Why? I hesitated. Not because I didn't have an answer, but because saying it aloud made it too real. My brother, I said finally. Voice flat, tight. He fought in the first riots, smuggled medicine to the wounded, saved lives. I tied off a bundle of charges, fingers moving on muscle memory alone. The Empire caught him, I said, branded him a traitor, executed him. A pause. Shot him in the back while he tried to run. The words sat heavy between us, thick as smoke. I didn't look at Kellen. I didn't need to. I could feel his understanding in the silence. The kind of understanding that only comes from losing something you can never get back. And you? I said, forcing my voice steady. Why do you still fight for them? Kellen's hand stilled. He stared at the half-assembled detonator in his lap, like it held the answers he couldn't say aloud. Finally, in a voice so low I barely heard it. I used to believe I was protecting something. Another pause. But sometimes, you wake up and realize you're just guarding ashes. His eyes met mine. No masks, no armor. Just a man who had lost everything and kept fighting anyway. Not for glory. Not for duty. Because he didn't know how to stop. I looked away first. Because seeing him like that, seeing my enemy bleed invisible wounds, was more dangerous than any bullet. More dangerous than the gate. We finished prepping the charges. We didn't speak again. There was nothing left to say. We had made our deal. We had chosen our side, or maybe just chosen the lesser evil. And now all that was left was to see if we could live with it. Or die trying. We moved out, satchels heavy, guns loaded. Back toward the sleeping beast in the heart of the ruins. Back toward the end of everything. Kellen's point of view.
The tunnels felt tighter than before. Or maybe that was just the weight pressing against my chest, the kind you couldn't scrape off, no matter how many missions you survived. Fiona moved ahead of me, silent, sharp, deadly in her own right. If someone had told me a month ago that I'd be walking side by side with a rebel into the heart of a government installation to blow up a priceless artifact, I would have shot them on sight. And yet here we were. Both traitors in our own way. Both too stubborn to back down. I tightened my grip on the satchel of charges. We were close now. The gate's pull was a whisper under my skin, a cold hum I couldn't tune out. It wanted something from us. Needed something. And that terrified me more than all the Empire's armies put together. We slipped back into the main chamber through the collapsed ventilation shaft. The gate loomed ahead, a monolith of polished black stone rimmed with silver veins. Still pulsing. Still alive. The guards were fewer than before, maybe reassigned, maybe already inside reporting the breach. Either way, it worked to our advantage. For now. Fiona and I ducked behind a rusted control console. We exchanged a look. No words. Just a nod. The plan was simple. Plant the charges around the gate's foundation points. Set a delayed detonation. Get the hell out before the whole chamber collapses. Simple. Clean. Fatal if we screwed it up. We moved. Low and fast. I peeled left while Fiona headed right, weaving between fallen debris and shattered glass. I counted steps, breaths, heartbeats. Every second mattered. I reached the first anchor point, a black stone pillar etched with glyphs that shifted and shimmered if you stared too long. I avoided looking directly at it, forcing my hand steady as I secured the first charge. 1 done. 5 to go. Movement flickered at the edge of my vision. I froze. A patrol, 2 soldiers in Empire black, rifles ready. They hadn't seen me yet. I slipped behind a collapsed beam, heart hammering. My comm crackled softly, Fiona's voice, barely a whisper. Patrols, 2 o'clock. You see them? I pressed my finger to the comm. Seen. Stay low. Let them pass. The soldiers paused near the gate, murmuring to each other. I caught fragments. Something's wrong. Not responding like before. Orders to increase security. Panic gnawed at the edges of my mind. We had minutes, maybe less, before the whole place went on full lockdown. I waited until they moved on, then sprinted to the next point. Second charge set. Third. Each one a promise. Each one a death knell. Halfway to the 4th anchor, a voice rang out across the chamber. Halt! Identify yourselves! I dropped behind cover, swearing under my breath. Fiona was exposed halfway through placing her charge. The soldier raised his weapon. I didn't think. I moved. 1 shot. Clean. Silent. The man dropped like a stone, his weapon clattering from lifeless hands. Fiona didn't flinch, just finished setting the charge and gave me a curt nod. Professional. Efficient. But when our eyes met, there was something there. Not gratitude. Not admiration. Something darker. Understanding. We were killers. And we were good at it. We raced through the last anchor points, adrenaline burning through our veins. The final charge clicked into place beneath the central platform, a lattice of ancient metal and strange crystals. I armed the detonator, set the timer, 3 minutes. Just enough time to get clear if we moved fast. Done, I said into the comm. Fiona's voice came back instantly. Move to extraction? We sprinted for the exit tunnel, the one we had scouted earlier. But just as we reached it, alarms wailed. Searing, shrill, deafening. Red lights bathed the chamber in blood. And behind us, shouts. Footsteps. Gunfire. Go! Fiona shouted, shoving me ahead. I didn't argue. We ran weaving through the ruins as pulse rounds shattered the air around us. The gate roared behind us, a sound so deep it rattled my teeth. It was waking up. It knew what we were trying to do. And it was angry. We dove into the tunnel just as the first tremors shook the ground. Chunks of ceiling rained down, dust choking the air. I grabbed Fiona's wrist, hauling her through the narrowing gap. We tumbled into the side passage just as a shockwave ripped through the main chamber. The world shuddered. Lights blew out in a cascade of sparks. And then, silence. Heavy, aching silence. We lay there for a moment, gasping, coughing, ears ringing. Alive. Barely. Fiona rolled onto her side, wiping blood from a cut on her temple. "Tell me we killed it," she rasped. I sat up, peering back through the rubble. A dull red glow flickered deep inside the ruins. We wouldn't know for sure until later. But one thing was certain. The gate wasn't whole anymore. And neither were we. We stumbled to our feet. No time to rest. The Empire would be on full alert now, sweeping every sector for survivors, rebels, traitors. People like us. Fiona glanced at me, and for the first time since this nightmare began, she smiled. It wasn't a warm smile. It was a smile carved from exhaustion and fury and stubborn, bloody hope. A soldier's smile. And somehow it was enough. I returned it with a grim nod. "Let's move," I said. She fell into step beside me without a word. Not allies. Not friends. Something messier. Something more dangerous. Two broken blades pointed at the same enemy. For now. We disappeared into the tunnels, swallowed by smoke and ash and the promise of the war still to come. The gate was broken. But the real battle was just beginning. The console's dying glow flickered across Fiona's face, sharp with determination. I saw her jaw clench, her fists tighten. Good. We would need every ounce of that stubborn fire. Because he was coming. The Black Sun. Not just a name, whispered in terror across the rebel circuits I had seen him once, long ago. Before the mark was burned into my skin. Before I forgot what mercy tasted like. I yanked the power core from the console and smashed it under my boot, cutting off the transmission. No point in listening to the Empire's orders any longer. We already knew our fate. It was standing in this room with us. Breathing. Bleeding. Fighting. "How long do we have?" Fiona asked, voice low. I swept my gaze around the chamber, noting the possible exits, the structural weak points. "Hours, if we're lucky," I said. "Minutes, if he's close." Her lips pressed into a grim line. No fear in her eyes, not anymore. Only calculation. Good. Fear was a luxury for people who had somewhere safe to run. She holstered her weapon and moved toward one of the side shafts, her boots splashing through the water. "We can't stay here," she said. "No," I agreed, "but moving means exposure." She turned back, meeting my gaze head-on. "So what's the play, soldier?" I didn't miss the faint edge to her voice. Mocking the title I'd worn once? Despising it? Hell, maybe I despised it too now. Didn't matter. What mattered was survival. "We make it to the surface," I said. "Find transport. Get off the grid. And if Black Sun finds us before that?" I shrugged, feeling the old coldness settle into my bones, the one that had kept me alive when the whip cracked across my back and the orders screamed in my ears. "Then we kill him. Simple. Brutal. Necessary." Fiona studied me for a long moment, then nodded. No fear. No hesitation. I felt something stir inside me, a dangerous thing. Respect. Maybe even trust. We moved fast. Silently. Through the crumbling arteries of the forgotten city buried beneath the Empire's shining towers. I kept point, scanning each corridor, each flooded stairwell. Fiona covered our six, her aim sharp, her steps sure. We worked like a unit. No orders. No wasted words. Just instinct and necessity. An old maintenance shaft yawned ahead, its ladder rusted but intact. I tested it cautiously. Held. "Up," I said. She didn't argue. Just slung her rifle and started climbing. I followed, every muscle tense. Waiting for the inevitable sound, The whine of a drone, the crack of a sniper round, the rasp of boots behind us. But the only sound was our breathing and the drip of ancient water from above. The shaft ended in a hatch. Sealed. Manual override disabled. Fiona cursed under her breath. "Step aside," I said. She did. I drove my shoulder into the hatch once, twice, until the corroded lock gave out with a shriek of tortured metal. We tumbled out into a service corridor, newer but still deserted. Dim emergency lights flickered along the walls. The air smelled of ozone and rust. For a heartbeat, we just stood there, catching our breath. Then a low hum vibrated through the floor. Familiar. Deadly. Both of us moved at once, diving for cover behind a stack of abandoned crates. Through the cracked plastic, I saw him. Black armor. Featureless helmet. Moving with terrifying grace. The Black Sun. He walked alone. No backup. No drones. He didn't need them. His reputation was enough. Fiona stiffened beside me, her body coiled like a spring. I laid a hand on her arm. Light, warning. Wait. Watch. Learn. The Black Sun paused near the hatch we'd forced open. Tilted his head slightly like a predator sniffing the air. He tapped something on his wrist. A scanner flared a net of red light sweeping the corridor. I felt it brush over us. Every instinct screamed to run. But I didn't move. Neither did Fiona. The light passed. The Black Sun moved on, disappearing down another corridor. We exhaled shakily. Fiona turned to me, her voice a thread of sound. That scanner, it should have picked us up. I nodded grimly. It did. Then why didn't he act? I looked at the place where the Black Sun had vanished. Because he wanted to hunt us. Not to catch. Not to kill. To hunt. Like a game. I rose slowly, muscles aching. We need to move, I said. Where? I jerked my chin toward a half-collapsed stairwell. Up. Always up. Toward the surface. Toward danger. But also toward freedom. Maybe. We moved. Swift, silent. But every step felt heavier. Every breath tighter. The Black Sun wasn't chasing. He was herding. Pushing us where he wanted. Toward a trap we couldn't see. Yet, we burst into an abandoned substation, high ceilings, broken glass, the remains of machines long since scavenged for parts. Light slanted through cracked skylights. We were close now. I could smell the open air beyond the concrete and steel. Amara skidded to a halt beside a control panel, scanning quickly. Their emergency access tunnel leads outside. I followed her finger. A maintenance door, half buried under rubble. Small. Tight. Exactly the kind of bottleneck an assassin would love. No choice. No time. I slung my rifle and started clearing debris. Fiona joined me, working fast, her face set in grim lines. Behind us, the shadows thickened. The hum grew louder. A flash of movement. I spun, weapon raised. Too slow. The Black Sun exploded from the dark, a blur of motion striking like a hammer. Amara cried out as he slammed her against the wall. I fired a short, controlled burst, but he twisted, the round sparking harmlessly off his armor. He moved like something out of a nightmare. Fast. Precise. Deadly. I barely blocked the strike aimed at my throat, the impact numbing my arm to the elbow. Another blow drove the air from my lungs. I staggered, dropped to one knee. The Black Sun advanced. And then Fiona was there. A flash of steel in her hand. Not a gun. A blade short, wickedly sharp. She plunged it into the joint of his armor at the knee. He grunted the first sound he'd made and staggered. Just for a second, but it was enough. I surged up, driving my shoulder into his midsection, forcing him back. Fiona lunged again, slashing at the exposed cables along his side. Sparks flew. The black sun lashed out, sending her sprawling. I grabbed her wrist, yanking her toward the tunnel door. Move! We dove through the narrow gap, into darkness. Concrete scraped my skin raw. Fiona coughed, struggling beside me. Behind us, I heard the black sun's boots hammering the floor. Getting closer. We crawled. Ran. Stumbled. Toward the faint whisper of wind. Of open sky. Finally, we burst out into the night. The stars reeled overhead, cold and uncaring. The city sprawled below us, glittering and deadly. We were free. For now. Fiona collapsed beside me, gasping. I dropped down too, scanning the perimeter. No pursuit. But it wouldn't last. Nothing did. Not here. Not in the Empire's shadow. Fiona rolled onto her side, her voice hoarse. Next time, she rasped, you fight first, I stab second. Despite everything, the pain, the blood, the certainty of more horrors to come, I laughed. Short, sharp. Real. Deal, I said. We lay there for a moment longer, staring at the stars we might never touch. Then we rose. Together. And ran into the night. The city was a sleeping giant sprawled beneath the fractured sky. From this rooftop, I could see the glow of the outer districts, the endless movement of drones sweeping across the black towers, the pulse of the Empire's beating heart. And I hated every inch of it. Fiona leaned against the rusted vent shaft beside me, nursing her side where the black sun's strike had landed. She hadn't said a word since we fled the substation. Neither had I. There wasn't anything to say yet. Only choices to make. Bad ones. We need cover, she said finally, her voice low and ragged. I nodded. We need a miracle. She snorted a soft, bitter sound. In short supply these days. The black sun would be on us again soon. Tracking. Herding. Waiting for the perfect moment to strike. And next time, we wouldn't get lucky. We needed to vanish not just from sight, but from every sensor, scanner, and database in the grid. Problem was, there were only two kinds of people who lived off-grid in a city like this: ghosts and corpses. And I wasn't ready to be either. There's an old transit line under District 9, I said, scanning the skyline. Abandoned after the riots. No cameras, no patrols. If we reach it, we can disappear, she finished grimly. I met her eyes. Maybe. Fiona adjusted the strap of her rifle and straightened. Pain flickered across her face, but she shook it off. We move now, she said. No hesitation. No fear. Just the grim certainty of someone who knew what survival cost. I liked that about her. More than I should. The climb down was brutal. The old service ladder groaned under our weight, flaking rust in sheets. Below us, the city yawned a canyon of broken windows, flickering signs, and streets littered with refuse. We hit the ground hard. I pulled Fiona to her feet and we ran, sticking to the shadows, weaving through the maze of back alleys and forgotten streets. Every sound felt too loud. Every step, an invitation to death. A drone buzzed overhead. We flattened against a wall, barely breathing. Its searchlight swept the alley, slicing through the darkness. Then moved on. Fiona exhaled shakily. I tapped her shoulder. Move. Always move. We ducked into an abandoned storefront, some relic from before the wars, its windows shattered, shelves empty. I scanned the space, checking for signs of squatters or traps. Nothing. Safe enough for now. Fiona slumped against the wall, pulling a battered medkit from her pack. Blood soaked her side where the black sun had hit her. I knelt beside her, grabbing gauze and antiseptic. "Let me," I said roughly. She hesitated. Trust was a rare currency out here. But after a moment she nodded. I worked fast, cleaning and binding the wound. She didn't make a sound, even when the antiseptic bit deep. Tough. Stupid. Brave. "You're lucky," I muttered. "Could have been worse." She cracked a tired grin. "I'm starting to think luck hates me." I smirked, securing the last bandage. "Welcome to the club." We sat there for a minute, catching our breath. Listening to the distant wail of sirens. The city never slept. Not really. It just waited. Hungrier every day. "You said you knew the transit line," she said, shifting painfully. "I do." "Then lead, soldier." There was no malice in the word this time. No mocking. Just a shared understanding. We were fighting the same war now. Even if it wasn't the one we had chosen. We moved again, slower this time. Fiona's injury wasn't crippling, but it dragged at her. I adjusted our route, shorter bursts of sprinting, longer periods of cover. Better to risk slow progress than bleed out in some god-forsaken alley. District 9 was a scar on the city's surface, half-burnt buildings, melted pavement, shattered memorials to rebellions long crushed. The Empire liked to leave ruins like this intact. A warning to anyone who dared dream. We slipped past a checkpoint, 2 dead soldiers slumped over a console, their uniforms charred. Not our work. Probably Black Sun's. A message. "Run faster." By the time we reached the entrance to the transit tunnels, Fiona was limping badly. I scanned the access panel. Dead. Good. No security. No tracking. Only darkness. "Are you sure about this?" she asked, voice strained. "No," I admitted. "But it's the best bad idea we've got." She laughed a hoarse, broken sound. "Story of my life." We pried the doors open, revealing a yawning blackness. The air stank of mildew and rot. I flicked on my wrist torch, the beam slicing into the gloom. Tracks stretched into the distance, swallowed by shadows. Perfect for hiding. We slipped inside. The doors groaned shut behind us, sealing out the faint light of the surface. The dark swallowed us whole. Time blurred. Step after step along crumbling tracks, past abandoned cars with shattered windows and scorched walls. Graffiti covered everything, desperate pleas, curses, names long forgotten. Fiona stumbled once, catching herself on my arm. I steadied her without a word. We moved on. Somewhere behind us, the hum of a scanner whispered through the tunnels. The Black Sun was hunting. Closer now. Always closer. We found an old maintenance alcove half buried in debris. Not much. Just enough space to catch our breath. Plan our next move. Fiona slid down the wall, grimacing. I crouched beside her, listening. Nothing yet. But that could change in an instant. She leaned her head back, closing her eyes. "Why are you helping me?" she asked suddenly, voice barely above a whisper. I stared at her. At the dark smudges under her eyes. The blood crusted on her side. The fire that hadn't dimmed, even when everything else had broken. "I could ask you the same," I said finally. Her mouth twisted in a wry smile. "Maybe I'm just too stubborn to die." I chuckled under my breath. Maybe I am too. We sat there, side by side, in the dark. Not allies. Not enemies. Something in between. Something dangerous. Something real. For the first time in a long time, I didn't feel completely alone. And that scared the hell out of me. Outside the alcove, the shadows shifted. The hunt wasn't over. Not by a long shot. But for now, just for a heartbeat, we had each other. And that would have to be enough. The tunnel was different past the third breach. The air was heavier, humming with a strange energy that set my teeth on edge. Fiona noticed it too, the way her hand hovered closer to her weapon, the tension bleeding into her stride. She didn't ask questions. She trusted me to lead. I wasn't sure if that made her smart or suicidal. Maybe both. We moved carefully, boots silent against cracked concrete. The deeper we went, the older everything felt, as if we were descending through layers of history, each more broken and forgotten than the last. The Empire had abandoned these tunnels decades ago. At least, that's what they wanted people to believe. Ahead, faint light flickered. Not the harsh white of the Empire's drones or the sickly green of emergency backups. This was different. Warm. Alive. I raised my hand. Fiona froze instantly behind me, blending into the shadows like smoke. I crept forward, every nerve taut, every instinct screaming trap. But what I saw made me stop cold. An old platform stretched out before us, surrounded by scaffolding and half-collapsed walls. But it was occupied. Tents patched together from tarp and salvaged metal. Fires burning in oil drums. Figures moving between them, armed, armored, organized. Not Black Sun. Not Empire soldiers. Something else entirely. A boy spotted me first, couldn't have been more than 14, but he held a shock baton in one hand like he knew exactly how to use it. "Stranger," he barked. Weapons shifted toward us in a ripple. A warning. Fiona stepped beside me, one hand loose at her belt, ready to draw, but not yet. We weren't looking for another fight. An older woman broke from the crowd, tall, lean, her gray-streaked hair pulled into a severe braid. Scars crisscrossed her forearms, glowing faintly under the tunnel lights. Tech scars. Implants. Veteran of the old wars. She approached with the slow, deliberate movements of someone who had seen too much to be surprised by anything anymore. "You're a long way from home, soldier," she said, voice rough as gravel. I didn't answer right away. Her people were circling, boxing us in without seeming aggressive. Efficient. Professional. And dangerous as hell. Fiona straightened, speaking before I could. "We're not Empire," she said. "We're not Black Sun." The woman's mouth twitched. "That's supposed to make you friends." "No," I said flatly. "But it means we have bigger enemies than each other." Silence. Then the woman nodded once, sharp and decisive. "Name's Commander Reyes. Welcome to the Ashfall." Ashfall. I knew the name. Everybody in the Resistance did, whispered in the alleys, passed along in secret channels. A rebel network that had supposedly been wiped out years ago. Ghosts. Looks like the ghosts had teeth. "We don't have time for interviews," Reyes said, jerking her chin. "You're either useful or you're not. Follow me." We didn't have a choice. We followed. The Ashfall camp was bigger than it looked from the platform. Hidden alcoves, fortified maintenance tunnels, even a few salvaged drones repurposed for defense. These people weren't scavengers. They were building something. Preparing. Reyes led us to a war room, if you could call it that. Ringed with digital maps, data slates, and enough weaponry to make a Black Sunstrike team nervous. She leaned against a battered console, arms crossed. "You said you're running," she said bluntly. "From who?" "Black Sun," I replied. "And the Empire," Fiona added grimly. That got a reaction. A few murmurs from the rebels posted around the room. Reyes studied us for a long moment. You piss off both monsters at once? Gutsy. Not gutsy, I said. Necessary. Fiona stepped forward, her voice steady. They have a new weapon. Something off-grid. Bio-enhanced. They're hunting us because we know about it. I shot her a glance. We hadn't agreed to share that detail yet. But maybe she was right. If the Ashfall were going to help us, they needed the full story. Reyes's eyes narrowed. Bioweapons. Fiona nodded. They're targeting civilians, testing it, perfecting it. And when they're done, I said, they'll roll it out across every major resistance cell left standing. Including places like this. For the first time, real tension flickered across Reyes's scarred face. She understood. This wasn't just our fight anymore. It was everyone's. You need proof, Reyes said. It wasn't a question. It was a command. I reached into my jacket, pulling out the encrypted data shard Fiona and I had stolen from the Black Sun base before the ambush. The reason we were being hunted. The reason we were still alive. Reyes took it carefully, weighing it in her palm. Then she slid it into a battered terminal patched together from pre-war tech. Static buzzed. Then lines of data began to scroll across the cracked screen. Schematics. Reports. Video feeds. Images of bodies in cold storage. Test sites. Experiments. Reyes's face hardened as she read. The others gathered around, silent and grim. The boy who had first spotted us looked away, face pale. When the screen went black, Reyes turned back to us. You're telling me they already deployed this? They're close, Fiona said. Too close. And you think we can stop them? Reyes said flatly. I met her gaze, unflinching. I know we can. Because if we didn't, there wouldn't be anything left worth saving. Reyes let out a long breath. Then she smiled. It wasn't a friendly smile. It was a soldier's smile, sharp and thin and hungry for blood. Looks like Ashfall just found itself a new mission. Behind her, the camp stirred into motion. Weapons being readied. Maps being marked. Orders barked in low, urgent voices. We had lit a fuse. And there was no turning back now. Fiona leaned close to me, her voice barely a whisper. Are you sure about this? No, I said, a grim grin tugging at my mouth. But for the first time in a long time, it feels like the right fight. The war for the stars had already begun. We just didn't know it yet. But we would. Soon.
Fiona's point of view. They didn't trust me. I could feel it in the way their eyes lingered too long, in the half pauses when I spoke. I wasn't one of them, not really, not yet. And Kellen? They watched him like he was a bomb counting down. They weren't wrong. The Ashfall base wasn't just a hideout, it was a statement. Twisted tunnels reinforced with scavenged plating, tech rigs cannibalized from fallen drones, bunkers deeper than Empire scanners could reach. Survival had turned into structure, discipline. This was a resistance, reborn from ash and grief. Commander Reyes ruled it like a knife ruled a throat. Silent, sharp, unyielding. She hadn't smiled once since we'd handed over the shard. Not when she saw the footage of the Empire's bioweapons. Not even when she said, "You've just handed me a war." Kellen stood beside me, quiet, coiled. Watching. Waiting. The scar above his brow had split again, blood dried like rust down his temple. He hadn't even noticed. I had. "Medical's that way," Reyes barked without looking up. "Your girl looks half dead." I bristled. She speaks for herself, I snapped. Kellen's lip twitched. The bastard was amused. Reyes raised an eyebrow but didn't argue. Suit yourself, just don't bleed on my floor. She walked off with 2 lieutenants trailing her, one twitchy, one too quiet. Their shoulders said obedience. Their eyes said doubt. I wasn't sure which scared me more. Later, after the war room cleared, I found myself in a small alcove tucked behind old data servers, half-lit, silent. I just needed to breathe. But of course, Kellen followed. Like a shadow that refused to stay put. You shouldn't snap at Reyes, he said softly, leaning against the wall like he owned the air. Thanks for the tip, I muttered, biting back the pain in my side. Maybe next time I'll ask you to bark for me. Depends on the tone, he murmured. I shot him a look. He smirked. Still the smug, infuriating soldier. But his eyes were tired. Haunted. Do you trust her? I asked finally. More than I trust the Empire. That's not saying much. It's not meant to. We stood in silence, the hum of machinery all around us like a heartbeat that didn't belong to either of us. Then he stepped closer. Too close. I don't trust her, I whispered. Not yet. You don't trust anyone. I trust me. And what about me? His voice dipped, low, steady, lethal. Not a challenge. A confession? I looked up into those storm-dark eyes, and for a breath, just one, I hated how much of me wanted to say yes. Instead, I stepped back. Smart girl. Coward. Maybe both. Before either of us could say what didn't need saying, a shout echoed through the tunnels. Urgent. Sharp. We moved. In the main chamber, Reyes stood by a console, her jaw tight. We've got movement, she said. North entrance, 6 heat signatures. Kellen stiffened beside me. Black sun? Could be, she said. Could be worse. The air changed. Thicker. Colder. Like something ancient was threading its fingers through the metal and dust. Reyes turned to me. You said they were experimenting, testing. They are. Good. She grinned. Thin. Brutal. Time to see how well your intel holds up. We moved in coordinated silence. I followed Reyes's lead through a back corridor flanking the entrance tunnel. Kellen went the opposite way, looping behind, silent as a knife. This was the rhythm of war. Plan. Split. Strike. Pray. What walked through the breach wasn't human anymore. Humanoid, yes, but not human. Their skin was blistered with cybernetic implants. Their eyes glowed faint green beneath scorched goggles. Their movements were wrong. Jerky, like puppets handled by something not quite real. And they weren't alone. Behind them came the humming. Low. Unnatural. Felt in the bone before my ear. A scout drone, black sun markings stripped clean. Reprogrammed. Twisted. Reyes didn't hesitate. Kill the tech first, she ordered. I didn't wait. My rifle barked once, dead center through the drone's eye. It sparked, screamed, and died. The creatures howled, then they charged. The tunnel exploded into chaos. Gunfire ricocheted. Screams tore through the air. One of the creatures leapt at me, too fast, too silent, and I barely sidestepped in time. It slashed at my arm, metal claws carving skin like paper. I went down hard. Breath knocked from my lungs. Then he was there. Kellen. Dragging it off me with a growl, slamming it against the wall hard enough to crack steel. His blade sank through its throat. It spasmed once. Then dropped. We didn't speak. We didn't need to. By the time it ended, 4 of Reyes's people were down. 1 wouldn't make it. The others were shaken. But Reyes... She just stared at the bodies like they were a puzzle she'd almost solved. This is just the edge, she said. I nodded, blood dripping down my forearm. They're coming. Harder. Smarter. Kellen stepped beside me. Then we hit first. Reyes looked between us. And for the first time, she smiled. It wasn't warm, but it wasn't cold either. You've got the nerve, she said. Both of you. Desperation, I said. Same thing. She turned, waving one of her lieutenants forward. Get them patched up, then bring me the war map. She glanced back once more. We've got a gate to burn. And just like that, the resistance had its fire. The hunt was no longer one-sided. And we were done running. Kellen's point of view.
There was blood in the water. Not real blood, not yet. But that tension before the break, when silence curls around you too tight, too still. The war map blinked in front of us, projected across a rusted table, flickering as old circuitry strained to keep up. Supply routes, intel leaks, outposts gone dark. Black Sun wasn't just expanding, they were testing us. Me. Fiona leaned against the far wall, arms crossed, jaw tight. She hadn't spoken since Reyes laid out the strike plan. Neither had I, because everything about it smelled wrong. We hit the relay station at dawn, Reyes said, pointing at a cluster of spires outside District 13. It's one of the oldest comm grids left, still functional, still Empire-owned. They're using it to coordinate biotransport between sites. And you want to hijack it, Fiona said flatly. I want to blow it off the map, Reyes corrected, but not before we steal their frequency keys. I shifted. They'll see us coming. Reyes looked at me, smile thin. They'll see you coming. The silence that followed cracked something open inside me. There it was. She didn't trust me. Not fully. She trusted me to be the decoy. The sacrificial hammer. Fiona spoke before I could. No, she said. We go in together. Too risky, Reyes snapped. Too bad. Reyes didn't argue again. She just walked out. We stood there after, alone in the half-lit chamber, the hum of servers pulsing around us like a second heartbeat. You didn't have to speak up, I said. She shot me a look. I wasn't going to watch you walk into a slaughter. That's what I'm good at. Doesn't mean I want to watch it. Her voice cracked at the edges. Barely. But I caught it. I always did. An hour later, we were suited up. Stealth armor, EMP grenades, low-sig rifles calibrated for underground resonance. The relay station sat atop a cliff above the old canal grid, guarded by repurposed mech units and a half-dozen security drones on fixed loops. We didn't need stealth. We needed precision. The ride there was quiet, just us and the shadows. I watched Fiona in the dim light of the carrier. Focused. Angry. Beautiful. I lied, she said suddenly, not looking at me. I frowned. About what? When I told Reyes I wanted to help you because it was the smart call. I raised a brow. What was the truth? She finally looked at me. I didn't want to lose you. The world narrowed. The carrier jolted. Landing sequence engaged. We were out of time. But that look, those words, they followed me into the drop zone like a second skin. The relay station was a tower of decaying steel and jagged antennae, rising like a blade through the fog. The sentries moved in clockwork formation, cold, perfect. We split up at the base, standard pincer move. She climbed. I crawled. 30 seconds to breach point. I hit the underside of the comm hub just as the sentries turned toward Fiona's side. They weren't programmed to expect two. She was a storm in silence. Dropped one with a pulse shot to the core. Ducked a second, sliced through its optic node with that wicked curved blade she carried now. The third went down to my rifle, clean, surgical. We regrouped by the access hatch, breathless, eyes hot. You okay? I asked. Define okay, she panted. I grinned. Still breathing, she snorted. Barely. The data room was buried 4 levels deep. They'd fortified it since the last intel drop. Pressure-locked doors, retina scans, backup AI surveillance. I tossed her a look. She already had her override kit out. Damn, she was fast. And ruthless. 3 minutes, she whispered. I nodded, taking position at the door. The moment she cracked it, alarms blared. Of course. No such thing as a clean op anymore. The data core sat on a suspended terminal, humming with Empire encryption. Fiona ripped the shard from her belt and started the download. I held the line. 2 minutes in, the first wave hit. Stun drones and skirmish bots. They didn't expect return fire. That was their mistake. 1 minute. Blood on the walls. Smoke thick in my lungs. Still holding. Fiona shouted, "Got it!" We moved. Up. Fast. Fire behind us. We burst through the side tower exit, the ledge crumbling beneath our boots. Below us, nothing but wind and ancient metal. No time to backtrack. Fiona didn't hesitate. She jumped. I cursed and followed. The fall was brutal. Air punched from my chest, gravity wrenching every joint. We hit the netting strung by Reyes's team at the cliff base. Alive! Barely. Reyes was waiting when we limped back in. She took the shard without ceremony, slid it into her system, and scanned the code. Her eyes went sharp. Then sharper. This is not what I expected. What is it? Fiona asked, voice tight. Reyes looked up. This isn't a transport hub. Pause. This is a breeding lab. The words landed like gunfire. They're not just testing bioweapons anymore, Reyes said. They're growing them. Accelerated organics. Fusion cores embedded. Grown soldiers. My stomach turned. Fiona was pale. They're preparing for mass deployment, I said. Reyes nodded grimly. And we've got 6 days, maybe less, before they activate the next wave. Silence. Then Fiona whispered, Then we burn it all down.
Fiona's point of view. The lab burned. Reyes's people hadn't waited. Once the intel was confirmed, they hit the site like a thunderclap. Detonations timed to collapse the breeding pods, servers fried mid-upload, every trace of Black Sun's twisted work reduced to cinder and static. I watched from the ridge with Kellen beside me, the firelight licking across his jaw, painting him in war. He didn't say anything. Neither did I. But something inside both of us had shifted. This wasn't just survival anymore. This was personal. The camp moved that night, standard protocol after a major strike. Ashfall didn't leave footprints. We took only what we could carry. Burned what we left behind. But for once, Reyes didn't bark orders at us. She let us drift behind the caravan, her gaze unreadable. Like she knew. Like she understood. We walked for hours, following the gutted highway until we reached a cratered freight tunnel buried under collapsed scaffolding. Temporary shelter. Safe enough. Kellen and I were assigned to the far alcove, walled by rock and ancient steel. No one said it, but it was deliberate. They were giving us space. Or maybe they were giving me a choice. I dropped my pack and sat against the far wall, exhaustion clawing up my spine. Kellen crouched by the entry, checking the perimeter with his usual hypervigilance. Always scanning. Always watching. Like he didn't know how to stop. Like he was afraid if he did, he'd feel something he couldn't control. You can relax, I said softly. We've got eyes posted on every entrance. I don't relax, he said without looking back. No, you don't. He finally turned, stepping into the soft blue light of the emergency lantern. For a second, the weight dropped off him. his armor, his mission, the masks he wore to keep the ghosts at bay. What was left was just Kellen. The man. The fracture. The fire. You looked scared earlier, he said, voice low. I wasn't. You were quiet. Not the same thing. He stepped closer. You're always quiet when you're scared. I don't scare easily. No, he murmured. You don't. Another step. Closer. Too close. Why are you really here, Kellen? That caught him. I watched the shadow flicker in his eyes. The old war wound. The ache he didn't talk about. I used to think it was about revenge, he said. About paying back what the Empire took. And now? He exhaled, slow, ragged. Now, I think I just didn't want to die without someone knowing who I really was. My breath caught. He wasn't saying it to manipulate me. He wasn't saying it to sound heroic. He said it because it was the first real thing he'd spoken in days. Maybe weeks. And it shattered something in me I didn't know I'd been holding. I stood, walked to him slowly. My hand brushed his chest, light, uncertain, feeling the rise and fall beneath the fabric, the warmth, the restraint. He didn't move, didn't flinch. Just stared at me like I was the only real thing in a galaxy gone dark. I rose onto my toes, lips hovering just above his jaw. I see you, I whispered. His breath hitched, a single beat of hesitation. Then he devoured me. The kiss wasn't tender, it was war. Tongue, teeth, breath. Every moment we'd swallowed back came roaring through. He slammed me against the cold wall, hands in my hair, mouth demanding, more, deeper, harder. I gasped against him, clawing at the clips of his armor until the plating hit the floor in pieces. I felt him, hot, solid, ready, through his pants, and my body responded before my mind could catch up. I tugged his shirt off, nails dragging over his chest, his ribs. That scar across his side I'd cleaned a dozen times but never touched like this. He growled low, deep in his throat, pressing me harder against the steel. You sure? He rasped, voice raw. I bit his bottom lip. Try and stop me. He spun me, my back hitting the edge of the cot. We fell together, him above me, his weight grounding me like gravity. His hands were everywhere, ripping my shirt open, tracing every line of skin, every scar, every shiver. When he reached my waistband, he paused only long enough to look me in the eyes. The way he looked at me? Like he was about to pray with his mouth. He kissed down my neck, my chest, over my ribs. When his lips hit the space just above my hip bone, I let out a sound I didn't recognize, half breath, half need. He pulled my pants down slowly. Excruciating. Reverent. And when his mouth finally found me there, stars. Actual stars. I arched, fingers gripping his hair, thighs trembling as he worked me open with his tongue. Slow at first, then deeper, faster, until I was gasping his name in broken syllables. Kellen. He didn't stop. Didn't let me come down. His fingers joined his mouth, curling just right, hitting that spot that shattered me from the inside out. I cried out, not quiet, not shy. My body shook against him as the wave crashed, dragged me under, and broke me apart. But he wasn't done. Oh no, baby. He climbed back over me, breath wild, pupils blown, the tip of him hard and aching against my thigh. I reached down between us, wrapped my fingers around him, thick, smooth, pulsing with need, and he hissed through his teeth. Fiona! My name was a curse, a promise. I guided him to my entrance, kissed him like I'd drown without it, and whispered, now. He thrust in, deep and slow. We both gasped. And then we moved. Together. Against the cot, against the steel, against the world. His mouth found my throat, my breasts, and my lips again and again. His hips drove into me harder, faster, deeper, until I was a mess of moans and breath and begging. He growled something into my skin. Low, rough, possessive. Mine. We came together, hard. Me first, clenching around him as I cried out, nails dragging down his back. Then him, buried deep, shuddering, spilling into me with a groan that could have broken walls. Afterwards, we didn't move. He lay above me, face buried in my neck, both of us shaking with what we'd just torn open. The silence was sacred. His heart thundered against mine. My legs were still trembling. His breath was warm and erratic against my collarbone. I didn't know it could feel like that, I whispered. He smiled against my skin. Neither did I. We didn't sleep much. Not that night. But we stopped pretending. Stopped hiding. And in the space between battles, we became something more than soldiers. Something more than scars. Something real. Sleep came slowly, fitful. But for once, it wasn't haunted. The warmth should have faded by now. But it didn't. Not from my skin. Not from the inside. And not from the way he held me. His arm draped across my waist, fingers unconsciously curled at my hip, breath steady against the back of my neck. I should have moved already. Gear to check, weapons to clean, strategy to finalize. But I stayed. God help me, I stayed. Because for the first time since the Black Sun took everything from me, I felt safe. And that terrified me more than any gunfire ever could. He stirred. A slow breath, a twitch of muscle, a low groan like his body was reminding him that even warriors had limits. I turned toward him, careful, quiet, like if I moved too fast, it would all vanish. But his eyes opened, and he smiled. That damn crooked smile that made it impossible to breathe right. "Morning, soldier," I whispered. "Not yet," he said, voice still rasped from sleep and everything else. "No." His hand slid lower over my bare hip. "Not until I say it is." I bit back a grin. God, he was arrogant. But I didn't stop him when he kissed my shoulder, or when his hand mapped a lazy teasing path across my thigh. I let him. Hell, I leaned into it. For a moment. But then reality came crashing in like it always did. A knock on the support beam. 3 taps, urgent. Ashfall's signal. Time to move. Kellen sighed as I sat up, reaching for my gear. "Can't even get a full sunrise anymore," he muttered. I threw him his pants. "We'll have all the time in the world after we torch the Empire." "Now that is dirty talk," he said, smirking. The tunnel was already humming with movement when we emerged. Ashfall soldiers strapping into armor, drones blinking to life, weapons being passed hand to hand. The air buzzed with tension. Reyes stood at the center of it, barking orders like a conductor before a bloody symphony. She saw us, gave a nod. Not a smirk, not a question. Just understanding. "Briefing is in 5, she said. "Got it," I replied, voice sharper than I meant it to be. But she didn't flinch. "Prep for a double strike. We're splitting teams." Kellen appeared at my side, jaw already tight. "Splitting?" "Secondary target just came online," Reyes explained. "Hidden facility outside the grid. Not on any Empire maps, not even ours." My stomach twisted. "Intel source?" Reyes didn't answer right away. Instead, she nodded toward a shadow near the tactical screens. A woman stepped out. Long braids, cybernetic eyes flickering. Dressed like a civilian, but moved like an assassin. "I'm Nira," she said. I hated her instantly. Kellen didn't flinch, but I saw the change. He knew her. Not well, but enough. And she knew him too. "Of course." Reyes continued. "Nira's a defected data broker. Spent 3 years embedded with Black Sun." "Why now?" I asked, crossing my arms. Nira smiled with too many teeth. Because they're about to wipe the table. All of it. You, us, civilians, entire sectors. They've got a protocol they call Final Eclipse. I didn't like the name. Didn't like the way Kellen suddenly stilled. He knew it. What is it? I pressed him. He swallowed once. It's their failsafe. If they lose control of their army, they burn it all down. All of it? All of it. Reyes's voice cut through the thick silence. We split forces. Nira and I will take a detachment to breach the data vault. You two lead the field strike. Hit the deployment bunker. Plant charges. Get out. I looked at Kellen. He nodded once. No hesitation. 30 minutes later, we were suited, armed, and aboard a stolen crawler headed deep into the outer rim. Kellen sat across from me, quiet. Focused. But not cold. He reached across the space, took my hand, and held it. Not possessive. Not like last night. Just present. And I realized I needed that more than I wanted to admit. As the crawler slowed near the ridge, the wind picked up. Ash. Dust. The faint crackle of static in the air. This place was totally wrong. The Empire had built their monsters here, and left them to rot. We exited the crawler, weapons ready, boots crunching over broken tech and scorched earth. Ahead of us, the bunker loomed. Half-sunken, armored, guarded by biosynths with mirrored skin and blades for arms. Kellen raised his rifle. Are you ready for this? He asked. I looked him dead in the eye. I was born for this. We moved as one. Silent. Sharp. Lethal. I took the first guard, EMP bolt straight through its spine. It convulsed, dropped. Kellen handled the second with a grenade lobbed smooth as breath. The rest reacted fast, but not fast enough. We were already inside. Alarms screamed. We didn't stop. Hallways blurred into red-lit corridors, then to labs soaked in shadow. We reached the core chamber, a room filled with tanks, hundreds of them. Clones. Each one nearly complete. Each one, me. My face, my body. But empty, soulless. I staggered. Kellen caught me. They were trying to replace you, he said. No, I whispered, voice cracking. They were trying to erase me. We planted the charges fast, one on each support beam, two on the tank coolant lines. The room was hissing with warnings when we ran. As we burst out the side exit, the ground shook. One charge had gone early. Too early. The explosion sent us flying. I hit the ground hard. Vision blurred. Ears ringing. Where was Kellen? Kellen! He appeared through the smoke, limping, bleeding from a cut on his temple. But alive. He dropped beside me, lifted me to my feet. Can you move? Like hell. We ran, fire chasing our heels. When the crawler lifted off, the bunker detonated beneath us. Tanks, clones, tech, gone. We didn't speak on the ride back. But our hands never let go. I didn't know I was bleeding until we landed. The crawler slammed into the floor of Ashfall's new outpost, hidden deep inside an ancient dam facility, quiet from the outside, fortified to hell from the inside. I stepped off the platform, boots heavy with ash and adrenaline. My ribs ached, my arm was sliced, and my heart was still his. Kellen walked beside me in silence, jaw clenched. There was blood drying on his neck, bruises along his side, and still he moved like a predator, watching. He always watched. But this time, his eyes were on Nira. She was waiting near the war table with Reyes, arms folded, cybernetic eyes blinking that eerie amber hue. She didn't smile when she saw us. She didn't even blink. She just said, "We need to talk." The room cleared. Reyes, Kellen, Nira, and me. And the moment the door shut behind the others, the temperature dropped. I got a ping on the data shard you retrieved, Nira said, sliding a projection disk onto the table. A flicker of light and files began to spill open. Maps, encrypted comms, logs. This wasn't just a lab site, it was a memory dump. For what? I asked. She stared at me like I'd just asked where the sun went at night. For you, Fiona. My pulse slowed. My spine didn't. What do you mean, me? Nira tapped a file. It opened to a log of failed clone transfers, notes, images, adjustments. The genetic donor ID? Solis F. Kellen stepped forward, fists clenched. Are you saying? She's not a clone, Nira cut in. But she was meant to be. Project Saraphim was designed around her genome. She escaped the trials, but they never stopped trying to make her. I felt like I was falling. No, like I'd always been falling. And I'd just now hit the ground. Reyes's voice was the only thing that didn't shake. How long have you known? Nira's answer was too smooth. Long enough. Too smooth. Too fast. I stepped toward her. Why didn't you say anything before? Because you weren't ready. Bullshit. She's lying, Kellen growled. She's been sitting on this for weeks, maybe longer. I was protecting her. From what? I snapped. The truth? No, Nira said, eyes flashing, voice like steel. From him. The silence hit like a gunshot. Nira didn't look at me. She looked at Kellen. Dead on. He was one of the handlers, Fiona. Back during the early stages of Saraphim. The ID tag doesn't lie. He was on the roster. I froze. No breath. No thoughts. Just no. Kellen took a step back like she'd hit him. I was embedded, he said, voice hollow. Infiltration. I didn't know. You didn't know? I whispered. You didn't know what they were doing to me? His face broke. The way a mountain breaks under too many years of weight. I didn't know it was you. Reyes said nothing. She didn't need to. The room was split in two. And I stood right at the center, bleeding from the fault line. I walked out. Didn't say a word. Didn't even grab my weapons. I just walked. The corridor narrowed into silence. Concrete, cold air, water dripping from somewhere high above. I braced my hands against the wall, heart thundering in my ears. He was part of it. He was part of it. Even if he didn't know, even if he never touched me, he wore the uniform. Footsteps. His. Of course. Fiona. Don't. I didn't lie to you. You didn't tell me. I didn't remember. I buried all of it. I didn't know until I saw the files. Until Nira saw the files. He stopped. Didn't argue. Didn't beg. He just stood there, all that strength wrapped in silence. Why didn't you say something the moment we got out of that lab? I asked, voice breaking. Because I knew what it would do to you. You mean what it would do to us. His silence was the answer. I turned back to the wall, biting back a scream. Do you want to know what I remember? I said quietly. He didn't move. They strapped me down, every night, took samples, ripped memories apart and tried to stitch them back in new. I used to wake up screaming. I still do. He stepped closer. Slow. Careful. Then let me help you fight them. His voice cracked. Please. I turned. Met his eyes. And this time, when I stepped forward, I slapped him. Hard. But I didn't walk away. I let him see it. All of it. The betrayal. The heartbreak. The part of me that still loved him anyway. Because loving him was a war. And I'd already surrendered once. Later that night, Reyes made her call. We move at dawn, she said. All of us. He pointed to the new coordinates Nira had provided. Final eclipse begins in 3 days, and if we don't stop it, there won't be another chance. Kellen stood across the room. Not beside me. not touching, but watching, waiting, bleeding in a way no one else could see. And me? I was ready to finish what they started, no matter the cost. Even if that meant burning down the last pieces of myself to do it. Kellen's point of view.
It deserved worse than a slap. I'd taken bullets, beatings, lashes, but none of them landed like her hand across my face. And what shattered me most was that she stayed. She didn't walk away. She let me see her. Let me feel everything I'd wrecked. And then she turned her back, like she was already learning how to live without me. Now she stood at the far end of the war room, speaking with Reyes in clipped professional tones. That quiet fury in her voice? That used to be mine. Reyes motioned us all forward. Me, Fiona, Nira, 3 Ashfall elites. Map lit up the room, blue light dancing across steel and scars. Final eclipse is centered here, Reyes said, pointing to an isolated sector past the grid's edge. Empire records call it Facility Aegis. No visuals, no confirmed survivors, but Nira's data shows movement. Biometric spikes, weapon pings, transport logs. And what are they building in there? I asked, jaw tight. Nira's eyes flickered. The final version. Fiona stiffened beside me. The perfected one? She asked quietly. Nira nodded. They're calling it Saraphim Prime. The words hit harder than I expected. Saraphim, her project, her name, her pain. And now it was back. Upgraded. Activated. We go in tonight, Reyes said. They're accelerating the timeline. If that weapon is launched, there's no reset, no recovery. And what's the plan? I asked. Get in, split, detonate the labs, secure the control core. And Prime? Fiona asked. Reyes held her gaze. Kill it. Silence fell like a blade. Fiona didn't blink. Then let me lead the strike. My stomach turned. No, I said, too fast. She looked at me, hard and sharp. Yes. You're too close. Exactly. I know how they think. I know how they built her. It's you they built. Then let me end her. Reyes glanced between us. Neither of us flinched. Then she nodded. Get ready. Everyone scattered. Except us. Of course. I caught her before she left the room, fingers brushing her arm, just enough to stop her, not enough to trap. Fiona. She turned, eyes flat but flickering, like storm glass right before it shatters. What? I didn't know, but I should have. I should have asked questions. Should have looked deeper. You deserved better. Her voice was soft, dangerous. You're not the first person who told me they should have. But I'm the only one still here. That got her. A flicker of pain. A pause. Then she whispered, Don't make me regret it. We didn't say goodbye before the mission. Didn't need to. Because if this was the end, we'd meet it side by side. Hours later, Facility Aegis. The walls were made of light and metal. Too clean, too quiet. Like the Empire had built a church around its monster. We moved in pairs, Reyes to the control servers, Nira to the generator cores, Fiona and I to the central lab. The silence. It crawled. Every hallway looked the same. Every breath tasted like betrayal. Then we reached the chamber. The glass rose 40 feet. Chambers, tubes, platforms. And at the center there she was. Saraphim Prime? Identical. To Fiona. But perfect. Flawless. Enhanced beyond reason. Flesh fused with biotech, golden wiring, tracing veins, irises glowing silver. And she was awake. Watching us. She's not active, Fiona said, voice ice. She's waiting. For what? I asked. She stepped forward, hand on her weapon. For me. A voice crackled over the speakers. Not Reyes. Not Naira. Someone else. Welcome back, Subject Zero? Fiona's breath caught. Who the hell is that? I hissed. Director Halden, she whispered. He ran the first trials. Prime moved. Not fast. Not hostile. She simply turned her head and smiled. Not a blank synthetic mimicry. A real, chilling smile. Why destroy what you were meant to become? Prime asked, voice melodic, layered. Fiona froze. I aimed my rifle at the tank. Prime looked at me and laughed. Still letting him speak for you? You disappoint me. Shut her down, I said. Fiona didn't move. Fiona! I can't just kill her, she whispered. She's not you. She's everything they tried to make me. Alarm suddenly blared. Over comms, Reyes shouted, We're compromised! Nira's team is down! Repeat, down! Traitor! Nira never planned to help. She led us here to watch us die. The tank hissed. Prime stepped forward. Not contained anymore. No walls, no limits. She looked at Fiona. Not me. Not the team. Only her. And said, Let me finish what they started.
Fiona's point of view. She moved like me. Stood like me. Spoke like me. But she wasn't me. She was the version the Empire had tried to carve from my bones, the perfect soldier, the obedient prototype, the silence after the scream. Saraphim Prime. And right now, she was looking at me like I was the defect. Kellen's rifle never wavered. One twitch, and he'd blow her skull apart. But that wouldn't end this. Not really. Because Prime wasn't just a weapon. She was a message. A monument. A promise that the Empire still believed it could play God and win. Fiona, she said, stepping forward, bare feet soft against the floor. You've come home. No, I whispered. I burned that place to the ground. She tilted her head. But I remember the cold, the straps, the needles. I flinched. So did Kellen. She smiled. See, you and I, we're not so different. Kellen hissed through clenched teeth. One more step, and I'll drop you. You won't, she said. Her eyes didn't leave mine. He won't, because he knows the truth now. What truth? I snapped. That he helped make me. Kellen tensed. I felt it like a shadow brushing against my back. Prime smiled wider. Was it guilt, Kellen? Is that why you couldn't stay away from her? From me? I didn't know, he growled. But you felt it? Even before you saw the files. You knew something in you was always chasing the ghost of what they made. She turned to me. Her voice softened. You loved him, didn't you? Still do. Shut up. He killed the girl they broke, and now he's clinging to the woman who climbed out of her ashes. I raised my weapon. I said, shut up. She took one more step. And that's when I saw it, her hand. The flex of her fingers. She was baiting me, buying time. The sound hit a split second before the explosion. A blast rocked the facility, just outside the west corridor. The lights flickered, sirens screamed. Then came the screaming. Human. Ashfall. Reyes's team. Kellen, go! I shouted. He hesitated. Not without you. I'll hold her off. You go, get to Reyes, stop Nira. Fiona. I grabbed his collar, pulled him to me, and kissed him hard. Then shoved him away. Go. He went. Reluctantly. But he went. The moment he disappeared, Prime lunged. No hesitation now. No games. Just violence. She moved like a storm, fast, precise, beautiful. Her fist collided with my ribs, hard enough to bruise through my armor. I grunted, spun, struck back. We fell into rhythm. Mirror against mirror. A dance I didn't choose. She hit me again. I hit harder. She countered my every move like she remembered me. Not my tactics. My instincts. You were always the mistake, she said between blows. The wild one. The failure. No, I spat, driving my knee into her side. I was the one who got out. We crashed into a console, sparks burst. She grabbed a scalpel from a tray. I grabbed a broken pipe. She slashed. I swung. We both bled. I was losing. She was stronger, faster, enhanced. But I had something she didn't. I had rage. I had purpose. And I had pain, raw and untamed. She pinned me to the floor, blade at my throat. Her face hovered inches above mine. Identical. Alien. I was made to be perfect. You were made to be obedient, I rasped. Then I jammed my knee up between her legs. She gasped. I grabbed the scalpel from her loosened grip and stabbed it through her shoulder. She screamed. It wasn't synthetic. It was real. And I realized something. She could feel pain. They hadn't taken that from her. Because even the Empire knew pain is control. She rolled off, clutching the wound, snarling. I am the future, she hissed. No, I said, standing over her. You're just a shadow. Then I raised the pulse gun I'd stolen from her own belt and fired. The blast hit her chest and lit her from the inside. She jerked once, then fell still. Eyes open, but empty. I stood over her for a moment, panting, shaking. She looked like me. But she was nothing like me. Because I chose to fight back. I chose. And that made all the difference. Over comms, Kellen's voice crackled in. Fiona, status? I tapped my earpiece. Saraphim Prime is down. A pause. Are you okay? I looked down at the body. At the version of me they'd tried to force into the world. No, I said. But I'm alive. I left the lab, limping, heart in my throat, gun heavy in my hand. The hallway was on fire. The whole facility was falling apart. And I still had one more monster to face. Nira. As I stepped through the broken door to the war corridor, Rhea staggered into view, bleeding, gasping. She pointed down the hallway. She has the detonator, she coughed. She's going to trigger Final Eclipse and turn every remaining Black Sun asset into a mindless kill switch. Kellen rounded the corner behind me. His eyes landed on me. Bloodied, bruised, still standing. And something in his chest broke. He came to me, gripped my face. I thought I'd lost you. Not yet, I whispered. But we're not done, Kellen. His jaw clenched. No, we're not. We turned toward the hallway. Toward the last fight. Toward Nira. Toward the end. Kellen's point of view.
I always thought dying would feel colder. But when Fiona stepped out of that lab, blood running down her side, her pulse unsteady, her eyes alive, I knew I could die right then and still feel fire in my chest. She survived. She beat it. And for a second, I let myself believe that maybe, just maybe, this was over. But the war wasn't finished, and neither was Nira. Reyes was bleeding out in the corridor, one arm cradling her ribs, face pale, lips cracked. She's going to launch the failsafe, she rasped. Every bioweapon across the sectors. It's all wired into the core. If she hits that switch, it's done. Where is she? Fiona asked. Reyes pointed. Lower level, vault room, sealed. I'll go, I said. Fiona's jaw tightened. We go together. We didn't argue. We didn't have time. The deeper we moved, the darker the halls became. Lights flickered, sparks danced like dying stars from broken conduits. I led, gun in one hand, blade in the other. Fiona walked beside me, no longer the medic. No longer the experiment. Now she was the executioner. We found the vault doors wide open, and there she was. Naira. Standing beside the control node, one hand hovering above the detonator. No emotion. Just calculation. The kind of cold it takes to sell out everyone who ever trusted you. Knew you'd come, she said, voice flat. Fiona stepped forward. Why? Because they never stopped hunting us, Nira said. Even after I escaped, I knew they'd find me, so I made a deal. You sold Reyes's people. You sold me. I saved myself. I stepped forward, leveling my rifle. You'll die for that. She turned her head, looking at me like I was nothing. I'm already dead, Kellen. We all are. She pressed the button. My blood froze. But nothing happened. No detonation, no override. Just silence. Nira blinked, then looked down. The detonator sparked, then fizzled. You really think I didn't see this coming? Fiona said, voice ice. You gave me all the codes, Nira. Every back door. Every line of access. I was inside this system before you ever left the war room. Nira's eyes widened. Real fear. But she wasn't done. She drew a weapon, sleek, obsidian, pulse-loaded, and aimed it straight at Fiona's chest. I didn't think. I moved. The shot rang out. Fiona cried out, staggered, but she was still standing. The blast had missed. Barely. But I was already there, across the room, blade out, shoulder slamming into Nira's chest. She hit the wall hard. We struggled, bone against bone, steel against steel. She was fast, but I was angry, and I was done letting people take from her. She landed one good strike, elbow to my jaw. Blood filled my mouth. I laughed, then drove the blade through her stomach. She gasped, looked down, stared at the steel like it was a foreign thing. You don't get to win, she whispered. And I leaned in close, voice sharp as the knife between us. I'm not here to win. I twisted the blade. I'm here to end this. Nira fell. Hard. Gone. I turned, breath ragged, vision swimming. Fiona rushed to me, grabbing my arm. Are you? I'm fine, I lied. I wasn't, but she didn't call me out for it. We moved to the console together. One last system still live. One final lockdown. One final trace. And then we saw it. A data file. Buried deep. Unmarked. Encrypted. But I knew the signature. We both did. Director Halden. Fiona's hands trembled as she tapped the interface. The file opened. A message. Video. His face filled the screen. Older. Colder. Smug. If you're seeing this, Subject 0, then I've already won. Fiona went still. Saraphim was never about one version. You weren't the first, and Prime won't be the last. There's a third facility, hidden even from the Empire, the True Lab, the Heart. You'll find it in Sector Null. The screen flickered, then faded. Silence. My jaw clenched. They lied to all of us. Fiona nodded. Tears in her eyes, but no weakness. Only rage. I'm going to destroy everything they ever built. I touched her shoulder. And for once, she didn't pull away. We made our way back to the evac corridor. Reyes was gone. Dead or taken, we didn't know. Half the team was gone. The rest were shadows. And we? We were something new now. Not rebels. Not survivors. Avengers. Outside, the sky was starting to break. First light. But I didn't feel relief. I felt war. Sector Null, I whispered. What's even there? Fiona looked at me, voice steady. The beginning? And for the first time, I was afraid. Not for me. but for her. Because whatever waited at the end of this trail, it wasn't going to let her walk away untouched. But I'd be damned if I let her walk into it alone.
Fiona's point of view.
I thought I'd buried it. The girl they strapped to a table. The scream, no one answered. The memories that weren't mine, injected like poison until I didn't know who I was anymore. But Sector Null was waiting. Waiting to rip all that open. To remind me of everything I never wanted to remember. The transport was silent. No Reyes. No Nira. Just me, Kellen, and 3 of the last Ashfall operatives still breathing. But this wasn't a mission for soldiers. This was mine. And if I didn't come back, no one else would understand what to burn. We hit the outer rim by dusk. Sector Null, marked on no map, shielded by a cloaking field powered by an ancient orbital core. The terrain was different. Dead. Not just war-scarred, sterile. Like even the dirt had been scrubbed clean. It wasn't built for defense. It was built to erase. Scanners jammed. One of the Ashfall techs muttered. Kellen glanced at me. They don't want to be seen. No, I said, stepping out of the transport. They want to be forgotten. The entrance wasn't marked. There was no door. Just a fissure in the cliffside, unnatural, symmetrical, humming with that quiet frequency only things that shouldn't exist give off. Kellen went first. I followed. We didn't speak. There was nothing left to say. The tunnel descended for what felt like hours, straight down, walls pulsing with power, the temperature dropping with every step. Then the light changed. And we stepped into hell. Facility 0. The true Saraphim cradle. Not a lab. A cathedral. Clean white corridors, unmarked rooms, glass tanks lining the walls. And inside those tanks, versions of me. Not just clones. Attempts. Some still, some twitching. Some barely formed. Some awake. I pressed a hand to the glass of one. She pressed back. Her mouth moved. I read the words. Help me. Kellen tried to pull me away. I stayed. Because that could have been me. Because maybe it was me. Because I couldn't walk through this place like a soldier. Not here. Here, I was the consequence. We found the central chamber at the core of the spiral hall, a throne room of cables and light. And at its center, Director Halden. Older now. Thinner. But not weaker. He turned slowly when he saw us. Like he'd been expecting this. Fiona. I didn't speak. You're earlier than I calculated. Still didn't speak. He sighed. You never were predictable. Kellen raised his weapon. Step away from the controls. Halden didn't flinch. Ah, Kellen, still loyal, still lost. He gestured toward the control pillar. Do you even know what she really is? Kellen's jaw tensed. I stepped forward. Don't. Don't what? Halden asked. Don't tell the truth. He looked at me. Not with hate. Not even with malice. With ownership. And that's what made me want to kill him. You weren't born, Fiona, he said. I don't care. You were made. I said, I don't care. He smiled. Then why did you come? I raised my gun. Not to threaten. To end it. But before I could fire, he said one last thing. One word. And it stopped me cold. Mother. The air snapped. I dropped the gun. Kellen caught my elbow. What did you say? I breathed. Halden stepped forward. Your DNA, your voice, your memories, we cloned them from someone else. But you... He touched the glass near the console. You were the only one that worked, that survived, that woke up and chose. My knees hit the floor. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't. Kellen knelt beside me, hands on my face. Don't listen to him. But what if it's true? I whispered. What if I'm not the first? His voice was steady. You're not. That caught me. He met my eyes. You're not the first. You're the only. The only one who broke free. The only one who lived. And the only one who didn't become what they wanted. I stared up at Halden. I'm not your daughter. No, he said. You're my legacy. Wrong answer. I pulled the blade from my hip and threw it. Straight through his chest. He collapsed. No scream. No words. Just silence. The alarms blared. Facility collapse. Auto wipe. Full burn. Of course. He built his legacy to die with him. Kellen hauled me up. We've got 4 minutes. I'm not leaving them. I pointed to the tanks. He understood. Didn't argue. Together we moved, smashing consoles, breaking seals, letting each version of me go. Some walked. Some crawled. Some didn't make it. But the ones who could, they followed. As the ceiling cracked, the evac team pulled us out through the secondary shaft. We exploded into daylight, the blast wave just behind. Facility null burned. Gone. Everything they ever made. Gone. We landed outside the rim. Me. Kellen. And 6 other Fionas. 6 pieces of my past. 6 ghosts who would never forget me. I didn't speak for a long time. Neither did Kellen. He just held my hand. And for once, it was enough. The sky was clean again. Not free, not healed, but clear. Like something ugly had finally been torn from the bones of the galaxy and burned until it couldn't come back. It had been 3 days since we leveled Sector Null. Since Halden's last breath. Since I found out I wasn't born in any traditional sense, but chosen, awakened, designed. And yet, here I was. Still breathing. Still me. More than ever. The other survivors, my sisters, if you could even call them that, remained quiet. They didn't speak much. Some couldn't. But they watched me like I was the gravity keeping their worlds from spinning apart. Maybe I was. Maybe that was what surviving meant now. Not just escaping, but leading. Kellen hadn't left my side. Not once. He didn't talk about the pain in his shoulder or the burn still healing along his ribs. He didn't ask questions about what Halden said. He just stayed. Solid, silent, warm. We stood at the edge of the cliff overlooking the old Ashfall ruins, where the Resistance had once called home. Now, it would become something new. So, something ours. They're rebuilding, he said softly, nodding toward the teams working below, clearing rubble, wiring comm towers, raising shelters. Yeah, I said. But they're watching me like I'm going to float off and explode. He smirked. You might. I laughed, quiet, hoarse, real. Not today. There was a weight between us. Not heavy. Not burdensome. Just full. Like all the things we hadn't said were resting between our bodies, waiting to be claimed. I turned to him. Told you I wasn't born. He nodded. And I told you I didn't care. I still don't know what that makes me. He stepped closer, eyes dark and steady. I do. I swallowed. Tell me. You're mine. He kissed me. Not desperate, not wild, just honest. And it was that truth, so simple, so certain, that finally let me exhale. We walked down the slope together. People greeted me, some with fear, some with reverence. I greeted them back. With humanity. Not perfection. That's what scared them about Prime. That's what made me different. I bled. I screamed. I chose. And that made me real. Later, I stood at the old launch pad where the next comm station would be set. A young girl approached, barely 12, arms scuffed, eyes sharp. "You're the one they made, right?" she asked. I nodded. She studied me for a long second. "Did it hurt?" I crouched down beside her. "Yeah," I said, "but only at first." She nodded like she understood something deep. Then she asked the thing that shattered me. "What are you gonna do now?" I smiled. And it wasn't bitter. It wasn't broken. It was whole. "I'm going to make sure no one else gets built in a box they didn't choose." That night, under the stars, I sat beside Kellen, his arm around me, our future stretching out like the stars we once ran from. We weren't fugitives anymore. Weren't rebels. Weren't broken. We were ourselves. And that was enough. They tried to create the perfect weapon. Instead, they created me. And I am not their legacy. I am their ruin.
How did it start? I wish I knew. A whisper in the night, a touch too soon. But when your eyes find mine, I freeze, like I'm caught inside a dream. I can't